The story begins with breaking news in Babylon. The Black Dragon Guild has decided to attack the 40th floor of the tower. They're confident and ready to showcase the skills of a first-class guild. Unfortunately, once again, they returned empty-handed. And once again, the reason for their retreat is none other than today's star, the #1 hunter. Once again, the Flame Emperor managed to defeat the boss alone. The reporter congratulates him and says that without a single flaw, he set another new record. Since the tower first appeared until now, he's still the only one who has defeated a boss by himself. The reporter asks if he has anything to say, and the Flame Emperor replies that he's had enough. He asks why they don't change that damn title of his first. He complains about being called the Flame Emperor, and questions why they don't just use his name instead of that crappy nickname, adding that Flame Emperor sounds like a plague. It's embarrassing as hell. A boy watching says to himself that he envies him. The Flame Emperor says he's going to find the person who gave him that nickname and torture them. The reporter apologizes, and the boy thinks that the Flame Emperor is someone who says whatever he wants. Then he looks at the comments. People say the whole world is watching, and he should be careful with what he says, questioning why nationality matters in the tower. One comment says that honestly, there's nothing wrong with his personality. He's already a legendary rank hunter. The boy comments that he wants to be just like the Flame Emperor too. The cat asks if he's his fan and if that's why he's protecting him. The girl replies that she's just stating facts and asks who doesn't know who he is, adding that the broadcasting companies are aware but still allow it. The boy types again that he wants to be just like the Flame Emperor. A guy says he doesn't know how the saint can even date someone with a personality like that and asks if that's why she's called a saint. The cat asks if the saint is dating the Flame Emperor, and the girl replies yes and says her friend is a hunter who saw them together. Then another girl, Flower, asks what they're talking about, saying the saint is her friend and told her that's not true. The boy keeps repeating that he wants to be like the Flame Emperor. He keeps typing and sending the same thing, over and over again. He thinks it must be nice to have everyone interested in what you say, and that he heard the Flame Emperor is insanely rich. He feels so jealous. He thinks that if this world were a manhwa, someone like him would definitely be the main character. The boy keeps watching. Reporters call out Yoon Suha and say that many aspiring hunters look up to him and do their best. Awakening right after entering the tower, shortly after turning 20, defeating a boss the Black Dragon Guild couldn't beat in 10 years, all in less than a month, a hunter who is literally a legend. They ask if he can share the key to success in one sentence. Yoon sighs and says he'll just say a few words, and it's up to them to understand. Those who are destined to succeed will succeed, but don't get in my way, even if you do succeed, or I'll eliminate you myself. The people around him call him the Flame Emperor and ask what he means by that, and with that, the broadcast ends. For the viewers still watching, the protagonist closes the laptop before it finishes. He lowers his head. With tears in his eyes, he says he's going crazy. He wonders if it's really okay to ignore others just because you've gotten that big. He says it was the reporter who was being ignored, but it felt like he himself was. If only he had a decent ability like the Flame Emperor, then he wouldn't have to live in this crappy studio or be looked down on as the worst F-class hunter with no abilities. He wants to be someone like the Flame Emperor. He's so envious and wants to succeed with his own abilities too. He wonders how amazing it would be if the Flame Emperor's ability were his. The boy looks at the pictures of the Flame Emperor he's pasted on his wall. As tears stream down his face, he realizes something. This is a scene he's seen thousands of times in videos. It could be a skill card. The system notifies him that it's an unpleasant envy yet to be discovered in the story. The tower, agonized by this unpleasant envy, sends him a skill. The tower praises him for his achievements. The protagonist remembers the videos and says, this feels different from what he saw online. But why should he worry so much when he's just received a skill card? This is the moment he's been waiting for ever since he arrived here. At the very top, a golden card appears. An S-rank skill. The system notifies that a skill card is being generated. The effect activates automatically upon elimination. After losing your life to an enemy, you can copy one of their abilities and make it your own. You cannot copy abilities from targets you've already been eliminated by before. Skills are copied randomly. The protagonist widens his eyes upon reading that he can copy an ability from someone who kills him and make it his own. However, he has to die. He gets frustrated and asks what kind of ability is that. The tower suddenly appeared in the world, visible on the horizon from wherever you were. Those who had nothing to lose were the first to step in and see what was inside. Each floor of the tower was filled with monsters from another world, and abilities appeared for the few visitors selected by the tower itself. Those who heard the news gathered at the tower and began to hunt the monsters. Voices say they once saw the Flame Emperor fighting in the hunting fields. He held a flaming spear and looked like he was dancing. It was like Nataraja, an incarnation of Shiva. Then someone asks if they can watch something else, and the manager asks why, saying it's just starting to get good. He asks if the person doesn't like the Flame Emperor. On the TV, someone continues saying that despite reaching #1 in the rankings, he hasn't changed. It's good to see someone truly courageous. The protagonist replies that it's not that. He says there are people out there living great lives and wonders why his life is crap. The manager thinks he's just an annoying drunk. The boy says to listen that yesterday he received an S-rank skill and asks what kind of shitty skill kills you when you use it. He hasn't even reported it to the Hunter Association yet because he's ashamed to tell anyone that his skill is trash. The manager tells him to go puke outside. As he walks, the system announces the daily Hunter rankings: Flame Emperor, Black Dragon Witch, Viper. The boy lies on the floor and says it feels like his head is going to explode. Then he hears a noise. A woman is telling the Flame Emperor to get out of the way, asking why all of a sudden. Yoon says she's a great actress. If someone were watching them now, they'd easily think she's the victim here. He calls her Lady Saint and says she poisoned her own drink with basilisk stomach acid, the same poison she had planned to use on him. If it weren't for his skill, things could have gone really wrong. The Flame Emperor pours the poison on the ground. The Saint says it was a misunderstanding. She only wanted to go on a tower raid with him as a teammate. Yoon says that's what he thought too, but he was wrong. She says they should talk it out. It's all just a misunderstanding. The protagonist, watching the argument while hiding, is confused and wonders if those two weren't dating. If not, what kind of couple talks like that? The Flame Emperor says that talking would be fine. It would be chivalrous of him, but he'll be the one to set the rules of this conversation. The boy thinks it's a fight between someone trying to kill and someone trying not to be killed. Yoon grabs her by the neck and says he'll ask the questions. She only needs to nod or shake her head. He has a lie detection skill, so she better not dare to lie. If she's honest during the conversation, he might consider giving her the antidote. He asks who ordered her to kill him. Was it the Black Dragon Witch? The Saint stays silent and lowers her head. The Flame Emperor says it's just as he thought. He starts releasing flames onto her body and tells her to say goodbye. The Saint screams in agony. The protagonist is horrified and wonders, is this guy a hero? The boy runs away, thinking he's a killer, a psychopath. He needs to get out of there now. Then he accidentally steps on broken glass and makes a noise. Startled, he looks back. The Flame Emperor notices him running. He says he thought he had gotten rid of all the rats in the area, but looks like one's still left. The boy sees the killing intent in his eyes and wonders if the Saint wasn't even his first victim. How many people has he killed? A dozen? 100? Then he falls because of his foot. He looks back and realizes his foot is far from his body. The Flame Emperor approaches, flames in hand. The boy starts trembling more with each step he takes. He pleads for his life, says this shouldn't have happened, begs him to spare him. Yoon asks if he saw that. The protagonist, crying heavily, says he didn't see anything. The Flame Emperor then asks, what exactly is it that you didn't see? Yoon strangles him and asks if besides calling him the Flame Emperor, he just happened to be in the right place at the right time and didn't see anything. He says the boy was pretty convincing, and if he were a bit dumber, he would have believed it. The boy says he won't tell anyone. Yoon says that if he doesn't want to end up like the Saint, he better answer properly, then asks who sent him and if he's also from the Black Dragon. The protagonist wonders if this is really the kind of person the world became obsessed with. The boy brings up the lie detection skill. The Flame Emperor seems interested. The protagonist says he heard he has it and that if he uses it, he'll know he's nothing. Yoon asks if that was a lie. The boy then asks if he really eliminated her with no certainty, just because she seemed suspicious. The Flame Emperor shoves him and asks how he dares to use such harsh words and who he thinks he is. He says the Saint tried to kill him, and if he hadn't eliminated her, he would have been poisoned the next day. The protagonist asks how he knows that. Yoon replies that he just knows. He has his contacts. And since they're talking about lie detection, he actually believes the boy is innocent. The boy thanks him for believing in him. The Flame Emperor starts releasing fire over his head and says he's seen too much. So he's going to lose his life, and his name is Yu-Su. The protagonist remembers when he was a kid and a man called him by the name Kim Gongja and said that with a name like that, he'd do well in Confucianism. The boy replied, yes, director. He thinks he doesn't want to die like this. The system notifies that he has been eliminated. The protagonist wonders why he had to lose his life like this, why he had to live this way. More notifications appear saying that the activation conditions for the skill have been met due to elimination. Kim thinks he could have lived just a little better. The system notifies that the random skill of Hunter Yu-Su-Ha has been copied and is creating a skill card. Gong thinks he deserves to live a better life. The system tells him to choose a skill card. The protagonist thinks that if he could just have one more chance, just one more. The selection is complete and the skill is being copied. Somewhere else, Kim opens his eyes. On the TV, the Babylon News is broadcasting live, saying that the Black Dragon Guild has started a raid on the 40th floor of the tower, and asking if they weren't supposed to prove what a top-tier guild is capable of. Unfortunately, they've returned empty-handed once again. Gong is lying in bed. He gets up, very confused. He looks to the side. The news also says the Flame Emperor has once again defeated the boss alone. The protagonist asks what's going on, and when he gets home, He looks at his wall on his phone and sees the video of the Flame Emperor angrily asking why they keep calling him by such a bad nickname when he has a name. Kim wonders why everyone is saying the same things they said yesterday. He remembers being burned moments ago, and now he's alive. He opens the skill card. It's an S-rank card, and he says it's the worst skill of the century. But then, looking at the other card, he's surprised. He thinks there's no way. Could this be the Flame Emperor's skill he copied upon death? It's the returned clock, with the effect that activates automatically upon elimination. It rewinds time 24 hours to the moment of death, with all memories and experiences preserved. But there's a penalty equivalent to the skill's rank. The protagonist asks if he really just went back to the day before his death, and his memories and experiences are intact, and that this was the secret to becoming a legendary hunter. He realizes that's why the Flame Emperor eliminated the Saint. Kim remembers Yoon saying only he knows and has his contacts. Gong realizes it's because he had already been poisoned by the Saint the next day, even someone innocent like himself. On the laptop, Yoon continues the interview and says, to wrap it up, can he ask the hunter to say one last thing to the viewers at home? He says that in the end, those destined for success will achieve it. But even if they do succeed, they'd better not mess with him, or they'll lose their lives. The protagonist questions the part about losing lives and says, let's see who's going to get eliminated this time. Then someone screams, fire! Nearby flames are burning through the area. People are panicking, asking what they're going to do. Kim looks out the window. People are yelling for someone to do something and put out the fire. Others run with buckets of water and fire extinguishers to stop the blaze. Gong thinks this place where he lives is different from the outside world. A city built by people who entered the tower to become hunters. And the tower, from the first floor, is spreading flames. People are running, the protagonist runs too, and asks what time it is now. He thinks it's almost the same time he got drunk yesterday. The fire was started by the Flame Emperor to destroy evidence of his homicide. Voices call out for anyone with water abilities to use them now and coordinate with others. The Black Witch says the Black Dragon Guild will take temporary control of everything there and tells everyone to follow their orders for now. This city has many names. The Alchemy Master says the area is secure, but there may be survivors inside and they will send in a rescue squad. Some call it Babylon, others call it Floor 1 City. The corporation leader says that's not the issue. This place has been isolated for 5 years and they were very lucky. Some still call it the City of Ascension, but essentially it's the same. A city you can't leave once you enter. People shout to bring more fire extinguishers and ask if there's no other water ability user around. The residents of this city are used to extreme situations like this. Someone finds it strange that the Saint hasn't arrived yet, as she's not the type to be late to help in emergencies. The corp leader says she said she had something to do tonight, and asks if it's a date, adding that she's been seen with the Flame Emperor a lot lately. The Alchemy Master says she doesn't like him. Something about him scares her. Someone approaches grumbling. It's Yoon, asking who played with fire without his permission. Gong grits his teeth when he realizes Yoon has arrived. The corp leader thanks him for coming. The Flame Emperor says he has arrived. A voice says a fire has started in these old buildings and asks if he can help. Yoon asks what he'll get for it. The protagonist thinks he's a crazy psychopath and wonders how he dares ask for a reward when he was the one who started the fire. The voice says he'll win the people's favor for being the #1 who saved the day. The Flame Emperor asks if they really think he cares what people think of him. People say who cares about his personality? He's a legendary hunter, just telling the truth. It's not like people don't already know what kind of person he is. Yoon walks away saying he refuses to do charity work. People film him and say it's great to see someone truly brave. Gong thinks no one knows. Everyone thinks the Flame Emperor is just an eccentric hero, but he himself is the only one who knows the truth, that he's a bloodthirsty killer, and he has to eliminate him. People ask where he's going. It's dangerous to get so close. The protagonist thinks that for humanity and for the honor of hunters, hunters are supposed to hunt monsters regardless of the method. A voice yells for the man to be careful. Kim runs toward the Flame Emperor thinking that this monster deserves to be exterminated. People say he's running into the fire. Gong enters the flames, screaming, thinking it's so hot. People watch in shock. The protagonist feels pain as he's burned. But this is the only way to eliminate that monster. The system notifies that he has lost his life and will return 24 hours in time. Later, Kim is lying in his bed. The Babylon News is live again, reporting that the Black Dragon Guild has started a raid on the 40th floor of the tower. Gong thinks it's great. The ability is working properly. The system confirms there's no penalty for using the skill, and the protagonist realizes that someone ranked F like him doesn't receive a penalty. He thinks that eliminating the Flame Emperor in his current state is impossible. Even if he got lucky and killed him, it would only send him back 24 hours since he also has that same skill, and the only way for a weak hunter like him to eliminate him. Gong realizes that the interview airing now was when the Flame Emperor first awakened. Yoon says it was the summer when he was 21, so it's been 11 years. The interviewer says he must have a good memory to remember that clearly. The Flame Emperor says it's not necessarily that, it just happens that the day he awakened was also his birthday. The protagonist thinks that 11 years ago, on June 7th, if you calculate to today, that's 4,050 days in total. After being eliminated 4,050 times, he could go back to before the day Yoon awakened. Kim stabs himself and is eliminated. The system notifies that he will return 24 hours in time. Gong says great, only 4,049 days left. He takes his own life over and over. Then he continues taking his own life. And the system keeps notifying that he will return 24 hours in time and there is no penalty for using the skill. And that he lost his life. And there are still 2,020 days left. Then only 523 days. And finally, just one more day. Then the protagonist is lying on the bed with a knife in his hand. He looks to the side, checking the clock, and thinks he did it. He grips the knife and realizes he has returned to the time when the legend of the Flame Emperor hadn't started yet. Kim takes a deep breath, relieved, and thinks he lost his life 30 more times than the original plan, which was 4,050, counting the time it took to kill himself, taking a few breaks here and there. But he went all the way back to prove that the legend of that demon is not eternal. Gong looks down, starts walking, puts on his hood, and thinks it's time to meet his first hunt. 11 years ago, May 6th, the protagonist walks and goes up to a window, watching his target lying down. Yoon wakes up and says his head hurts like hell and he shouldn't have drunk so much last night. To formulate the perfect plan, Kim repeated this day 10 times without fail. Every day, at 9 a.m., he wakes up in the F-rank dorm. Sue says it's time to work, and what a shitty life it is. At 3 p.m., he hunts slimes on the second floor fields and complains it sucks, that it's a drag hunting slimes all day every day. He wonders when he'll get to live an amazing life like the Sword Saint. His 21-year-old version is just a regular F-rank hunter, wishing for a golden card. Yoon asks if he can't just win the lottery or something, or at least get an S-rank skill. Normally, his wish would come true about a week later. A slime approaches the protagonist and he swings his sword, cutting it into pieces, saying that kind of future won't happen anymore for a guy like that. Later, Kim places a hand on his head. At 5:31, Yoon decided he wouldn't get anywhere just by hunting slimes, so he went to a tougher area where beginner hunters sometimes go. He's moved to the 6th floor hunting fields, a place where, for the next 36 minutes, he'll be alone. Gong approaches and asks to excuse him. He calls out to him. The protagonist is covered in plasma and asks for help, saying he was attacked by wolves and if he could get a potion. Sue asks if he already cleared the monster in that area and says there's no point in hunting here anymore today. Kim begs for a potion. Yoon asks what the hell kind of potion, says he won't even be able to complete his daily quota, and asks how much he'll pay. Why give an expensive potion for free to a stranger he just met? Doesn't he have any shame? Gong says it's sold at the Alchemy Castle for 20 gold and offers 20 gold. Sue lifts the potion and says he doesn't seem to understand the situation. He's at death's door and still only wants to pay 20 gold. Does his life mean that little? The protagonist offers 40 gold. Yoon says to hand over everything and asks if he wants him to even use his hands. Then he says never mind, he'll take it himself. Kim thinks he knew he was this kind of person. Sue takes his wallet, checks if he has 60 gold at most, and asks why he's so poor, says he should carry more money around. Gong says that's all his savings. Yoon tells him not to worry, he'll make good use of them. The protagonist wonders if this isn't just how life works and again asks for the potion. Sue pulls out a weapon and says he thought about it, but if he lets him go, he might come back for revenge later. He wants to live a worry-free life, but he's already seen his face. He asks why not just kill him now? Yoon is about to strike him. Kim knees him and thinks, so much for living without worries. Sue groans in pain. Gong immediately draws his sword and slashes him, decapitating him, splattering plasma. Gong says that to prevent the 1 in a million chance of him awakening and threatening his life, he'll make sure to finish him properly. The protagonist slashes him again and feels relieved. He says killing him was expected, but something strange bothered him. Why did he say his name at that moment? He finally realizes after 4,090 days and calls him a bastard. He says that even though he died with cold plasma, he still tried to pretend to be a knight in a sacred duel. Kim remembers him talking with the saint and eliminating her, and says he acted unfairly after killing those innocent people. Gong bows his head, then looks back, and finds himself face to face with wolves. He asks if they want to eat him and tells them to go ahead. He doesn't need him. The wolves immediately go to devour the body. The protagonist walks away and starts digging the ground with his hand. He had buried his bag there. He takes off his shirt, throws it into the hole, puts on another shirt, and says he's going to the 1st floor. He wonders if it's finally over. He's being transferred to the 1st floor city. Kim realizes it's the Vigilant Corporation in front of him. He gets nervous walking past them, but walks calmly beside them. The guard doesn't even notice anything and keeps walking while yawning. Gong thinks it's over. No one knows what happened. On TV, the 10th floor raid team is reported to have suffered another defeat today. Criticism against the Sword Saint is growing due to his refusal to participate, even though he's ranked number 1. The protagonist thinks the terrible legend of the Flame Emperor no longer exists, and excited, orders a crate of beer. The clerk asks if he isn't drinking too much and says his hunt must have gone well. Kim replies it went extremely well. Meanwhile, the TV reports that even though all hunters from rank 7 to rank 2 joined the 10th floor challenge, more people are calling the ranking system useless. Gong presses to open the hunter status window. The system displays his data and skills, and his main skill is returned clock. The protagonist says that's great and looks at these precious skills, but he has no combat ability. He wonders if this is what people call human greed. He calls himself shameless for wanting more, and says he should focus on what he can do with what he has. He could win the Merchant Guild Sangryun's lottery, or sell the method for clearing the higher floors, which no one knows yet. Things really are going great for him. He wonders what he should do next. Then, a man opens the door and asks for milk. He says to mix some vodka and sugar into hot milk. It'd be even better if it were sugar and not milk. A voice replies that they're sorry, but they're not a bartender. The man says not to worry about the payment, he'll pay for everything. Kim whispers that he's a weird old man. Then voices ask if that guy is really who they think he is and what he's doing there. In these times, for the sake of a hunter morality, public opinion says everyone should cooperate. Gong's eyes widen. The old man sitting there is the Sword Saint, whose real name is Marcus Callenberry. Many people had forgotten him after 11 years, since a long time has passed since his disappearance. But before the Flame Emperor rose to fame, he was the true #1 of the tower. The protagonist thinks this man must be the strongest of this era, and bets the old guy has several S-rank skills. Not strange ones like his, but actually useful combat skills. Kim looks at his own ability and wonders if it really lets him copy any hunter's skill, as long as he's killed by them, even the skill of the current top-ranked hunter. And now he can't even be eliminated anymore. That might actually be doable. Anonymous messages say they heard he was the head of a rich Northern European family. It seems no one knows what kind of skill he has. Apparently, even with all the wealth and connections a person could want, he gave it all up to pursue the tower. And they heard from someone else that he apparently has a habit of talking to himself. Gong checks his phone and thinks this guy is completely wrapped in mystery and there's no useful information, only rumors. It would be great if he at least had half the attention-seeking and fame-chasing behavior of the Flame Emperor. The Sword Saint tells him to shut up and not talk so loudly. The protagonist thinks he scared him. The old man asks if he understands the feelings. Kim thinks at least the rumor about him talking to himself is true and wonders why rank 1s always have something weird going on. He sees a rumor that the word careful should never be said in front of the Sword Saint. That's a 100% true story he witnessed with his own eyes. If you don't want to die, never say that to the Sword Saint. A guy calls the old man Geezer and says this is a public hunting ground and he's going to follow the rules. He asks if he realizes they already claimed the place for themselves. A few days ago, some high-ranking guys got into a fight with the Sword Saint on the 9th floor hunting fields. The old man finds that strange and says he's never heard of that. The guy says he better clean out his ears or buy a hearing aid, and by the looks of him, his grandkids probably have terrible personalities too. People ask if he's saying the Sword Saint killed someone and if he's in a big guild or just spreading rumors. The guy says to think whatever they want. He just wanted everyone to know what happened. In any case, if you don't want to be eliminated, don't talk about the Sword Saint's grandkids in front of him. The protagonist realizes it's something you should never say in front of him. Marcus tells everyone to be quiet, says he'll handle it and to leave him alone. He can't enjoy his vodka because of them. Kim thinks he has to test that rumor. The Sword Saint slams the table and thanks them, saying the drink was excellent. The clerk tells him to have a good day. The old man leaves the place. People watch closely and say he's finally gone, wondering if he has Alzheimer's and why he was mumbling so much to himself, saying that guy really knows how to kill the mood. Gong thanks them for the beer and leaves a tip. The clerk thanks him and tells him to come again soon. The bell rings as the protagonist steps outside, wondering where rank 1 went, where he could have gone. He thinks he followed him as soon as he left, so he couldn't have gotten far. Then he finds him. Since he's the only person in Babylon who dresses like that, he's easy to spot. He wonders what kind of skills the old man has. Kim thinks the Flame Emperor had a return skill, so what about the Sword Saint, who was already successful before the Flame Emperor? Gong wonders if he has an even more overpowered skill than return, because that skill will be his. He just needs a bit of luck. This place should be just right. The protagonist notices something and realizes Marcus saw him. He thinks the old man immediately knew where he was and no one will know what happens here. The Sword Saint stares at him. Kim apologizes for his rudeness and says he just wants to ask him a favor. Marcus smiles and Gong flinches. The old man asks about this favor and if he didn't follow him carelessly on purpose so he would notice. And why is he asking favors from an old man like him with such a frightened face? The protagonist thinks he misunderstood the reason he let himself be seen. He doesn't have any weapons or anything like that on him, but Marcus is holding a sword, almost like he's about to attack. Kim wonders if even just following him has already put him in a convenient situation, but why? The Sword Saint says he's quite the actor, as expected from a first-class eliminator. Kim wonders how, as an F rank, this is happening to him. He congratulates himself, he's going to be killed without even insulting the man's grandkids, and says he's sorry but doesn't understand. Marcus calls him deceitful, still pretending even now, but says he can't fool his eyes. Gong begs, calling him grandpa, and says he's asking because he really doesn't know. He asks how he could possibly look like a first-class eliminator and says he's actually proud of looking like an ordinary guy. The old man tells him to shut up and says he has several skills, among them a skill that shows how many people someone has eliminated. The protagonist panics because yes, as explained, an elimination is an elimination, and he would know that the person eliminated becomes a monster, but there's no way to explain that to him in this timeline. He bets Marcus sees the number 1 in his head. Kim says he understands, and even if it sounds like an excuse to please listen, he did it for a good reason. He swears to God. The Sword Saint says he disgusts him, a demon like him, who eliminated countless people, now trying to make up excuses. He himself hasn't lived an especially honest life either, but at least he hasn't committed mass elimination like him. Kim asks, mass elimination? And says that in his whole life, the only person Marcus cuts him off and says he keeps lying without shame. As for the number of eliminations, he can clearly see 4,091 above his head. Gong thinks he only killed Yoon once and took his own life 4,090 times to go back in time. The old man asks if the Black Dragon Witch sent him. The protagonist realizes that right now, in this old man's eyes, he's a serial killer who's eliminated 4,091 people. This isn't even about copying a skill anymore. The Sword Saint asks if he's not going to answer. Kim bolts, thinking that as long as the Sword Saint has that skill, no matter when he meets him, he'll always try to eliminate him. Marcus chases after him with his sword, yelling that he'll kill him with all his strength and calling him a demon. The old man tries to slash him, but Kim dodges. The Sword Saint asks if he just dodged his blade and says it's just as expected of a first-class eliminator. Gong thinks this old man must be deaf. Then he trips on a rock and falls to the ground, thinking he won't make it. Last time was pure luck. He won't dodge again. Then a voice says to be quiet. Marcus asks if he wants to interrogate this demon. The protagonist looks around, confused, and he doesn't see anyone beside him, but the old man looks to the side and asks, "Didn't I say I'd handle this?" and tells them to stop interfering in everything he does. Kim thinks this conversation is way too coherent to be schizophrenia and wonders if it's part of his abilities. Maybe it's telepathy. He remembers hearing rumors that skills like that exist. He wonders if the old man is talking to someone about him, saying he's with a person who committed 4,091 eliminations. That would make him a wanted man by the Hunter Association, hunted by major guilds and top bounty hunters until he's executed publicly on the first floor of the tower. He can't let that happen. He needs to be eliminated now before 24 hours pass. So he calls out to him. The Sword Saint says not to even try. He's already made up his mind, even if the person he's talking to is his master. Gong asks if, by chance, his grandkids are doing well, saying he heard he's from a noble family in Northern Europe, and asks if he knows how families like that are. The outside world is dangerous, and if people find out he's the Sword Saint, what does he think will happen? Marcus, without hesitation, attacks him. The protagonist's head spins, and he wonders if the moon was always upside down. Kim's head is decapitated, and he thinks it's beautiful. At least he got to see the final attack. He wonders how he can reach that level. He wants to be like him. He's envious. He wants that attack too. The system notifies that he was eliminated and his ability has been triggered. It's finally generating skill cards, and he'll now have the skills of 2 rank 1 hunters. He asks where the golden card is, saying he'll pick only one, just like with the Flame Emperor. Then he notices something odd and gets confused. He asks why there's no golden card, and says, "Wait, are you telling me that unlike the Flame Emperor, the legend of the Sword Saint was built without a single S-rank skill?" Gong kneels on the ground and says there has to be some overpowered skill among these silver cards. There must be. He sees he has 3 bronze cards and 4 silver ones. Ignoring the trash, he's got a 1 in 4 chance. That kill counter ability is probably one of them too, and he doesn't want it. He begs for a broken skill. He picks 1 card and says he'll never ask for anything else. The skill behind the Sword Saint's success. The selection is complete. The skill is being copied. He'll return 14 hours in time. The protagonist wakes up, he gets up and opens the hunter status window. Wondering if he did it, thinking this is the Sword Saint's main skill, he looks at it and sees it's at least an A+, and it doesn't seem like the kill counter. He wonders if it's another passive. He just wanted a really cool skill, something like martial arts or aura awakening. Still, he can't complain about an A+. Kim opens the skill card, Throne of the Sword. He says he can't tell what it does just from the name, then asks, "What's that sound?" Gong's eyes widen as he looks to the side, confused. He hears a voice saying, "I already told you if you're going to train in the middle of the night, do it outside. Show a little respect." It adds that he'll be pulled back if he goes too far away and that waking him up isn't necessary. The protagonist awkwardly asks for permission and asks who the guy is. The man turns and asks if he can see him. Kim replies yes. The man then asks if he can also hear him. Gong says yes, that they're literally having a conversation. The guy stands up and says, "That's weird. This shouldn't be happening." He asks where the hell he is and why the place is so small and where Marcus is. The protagonist asks if he's talking about the Sword Saint. The guy puts his face to the window and says, yes, even though that title is a bit much for a newbie like him. But yeah, he's talking about the old man who uses that name and asks where they are. He should be nearby. Kim wonders if the Sword Saint is actually a beginner. The guy says he can't see anything through this tiny window. The system shows the ability Throne of the Sword and its effect. In another world, he cleared the first 99 floors of the tower but failed the 100th. Dissatisfied, he couldn't let go of his worldly desires and became a spirit. Gong wonders if he's from another world, and if he's a ghost. Then he apologizes and asks if he was the Sword Saint's guardian spirit. The guy replies that he thinks so. The protagonist says he's really sorry, but he thinks he accidentally cloned him. The spirit is shocked and yells at him to return him to the old man right now. He asks if Kim said he copied him with a skill and says he can just cancel it, right? Doesn't he know how to reverse it? He complains that nowadays everything should be refundable. Kim yells back that he already said this is something he can't control. The spirit calls Marcus a stupid disciple and asks if his master was kidnapped by some loser kid. Gong asks if he can please stop crying upside down or he's going to have a heart attack at this rate. The spirit says this happened because that dumb disciple didn't respect him enough, and he had warned him to walk the same path he once did. The protagonist asks if they can please just live in silence. The spirit questions live and says he's already been eliminated. Kim asks if he can at least be a dead guy in silence. The spirit says he's never been disrespected like this in his life, tells everyone to look at this bastard mistreating the dead, and asks if it wasn't enough to be eliminated once. Gong wonders what kind of ghost talks this much, then remembers how the Sword Saint always told someone to shut up, to be quiet, and said they were interfering too much, and now realizes he not only has to hide from the Sword Saint, but also got stuck with this ability. The spirit asks about hiding from the old man and why he'd do that, saying that despite appearances, he's actually a nice guy, as long as you don't mention his grandkids. The protagonist puts a hand on his face and says he already knows that. He also knows one of Marcus's skills is the ability to see someone's elimination count. The spirit asks about the detective's eye and what of it, calling it a useless skill that only helps detect who's an eliminator and who's not. Kim says the number is 4091. He says the number floating over his head is 4091. The spirit asks if he's gone mad, says he's clearly an amateur, not even someone who knows how to use aura. He asks how he could possibly have eliminated 4091 people. Gong replies that he didn't eliminate 4091 people. He only killed one person, someone who would become a tyrant. The other 4090 are how many times he took his own life. He returned 11 years in time to eliminate that guy. He has a skill that lets him copy a random one from whoever kills him, and he got the time return skill after being killed by that guy. So when he dies, he goes back 24 hours from the moment of death. Technically, he's immortal. He wanted revenge, but the guy was rank 1, and because of the resurrection skill, he couldn't kill him. So he went back to before he awakened. The spirit asks if he really killed himself for 11 years straight just to get revenge on one guy. The spirit stares at him and asks his name. The protagonist gives it. The spirit asks why he got involved with the old man and why he stole his skill right after getting his revenge. Kim answers that it's because he was number 1. The fastest way to get stronger is by taking the skills of the strongest. The spirit says the reason Kim is being so honest is because the skill info told him no one else can sense his presence. He asks if it's true that no one can find out about this. Gong confirms. The spirit tells him to stand up. The protagonist doesn't get it, but stands up. The spirit observes him and says he's got a lot of perseverance. His body will be great with a bit of training, and he's ambitious. Not bad. He wants Kim to go hunt some monsters. Later, in the forest, Kim asks if he just wants him to kill them. The spirit replies, that's exactly it. Gong, with sword in hand, slices one in half. Another huge monster approaches, charging toward him. The protagonist faces it and slashes it down the middle. The spirit says, that's it. I knew it. Kim asks, knew what? The spirit says that when he was alive, he was known as the Sword Emperor. He was born in another world, and when a tower appeared, he quickly climbed to the top. Gong thinks the Flame Emperor became a legend after clearing the floor 40. But this guy cleared floor 99. That's insane. The spirit says that when you reach his level, you can judge someone's potential with a glance. The potential to become a true hunter. That's why he wanted to watch him hunt. The protagonist goes quiet for a moment, then says he's wasted his time because he has no talent for combat. The spirit replies, that's ridiculous. You've got talent. A lot, in fact. Kim asks if this is all a joke. The spirit says of course he has no martial talent. His movements are sloppy, his body untrained, and he's nowhere near sensing aura. But he has a talent no one else has. He's not afraid of death. Most people instinctively try to protect themselves in battle, but Kim is the opposite. and he probably vanished after dying more than 4,000 times. Gong asks if that really counts as a talent. The spirit says of course it does. Talent isn't something you're born with. Anyone can gain talent over time. And one of the rarest talents of all is overcoming the fear of death. It's incredible. The protagonist thinks no one has ever said something like that to him. Not even himself. He just couldn't stand being treated like an insect by the Flame Emperor. He couldn't bear it to the point where he took his own life 4,090 times. Death became his talent. The spirit asked him to answer something. When he died to the old man, what was he thinking at that moment? Kim remembers and says he thought it was beautiful. The spirit smiles and bursts into laughter, saying it's fascinating. And since his ability is to copy, that means Marcus now has another version of himself as a spirit guardian. He wants to see which one of them becomes the best hunter. He's going to help Kim until the day he can strike the old man down. No, until the day he reigns above him. And then they'll destroy this tower. Later, the spirit calls out to him and asks why he hasn't woken up yet. Gong asks for 5 more minutes. The master repeats 5 minutes and tells him to stop being lazy. Says the old man is probably clearing the 10th floor already. Does he still want 5 more minutes? The protagonist puts a pillow over his ear and the spirit asks if he's covering his ears. He says he'll sing a song from his homeland to wake him up, just so he knows. He learned it when he was alive, and he could decapitate 30 heads with just 1 verse. Then asks if Kim even knows what time it is. Kim gets up angrily and asks what time it is. It's still 4 a.m. and calls him a crazy bastard. The master says even insects start crawling at 4 a.m. and since Kim is weaker than an insect, he should get up even earlier. Gong says that just because he can't sleep doesn't mean he should kill his sleep too. And he's always wondered why the Sword Saint trained at that time. It turns out it wasn't his choice, but because this guy wouldn't let him sleep. The spirit says he woke him up because he was bored and asks if he's satisfied. Thanks to that, he can now wake up early and train. So he should be grateful and kneel in thanks. The protagonist says he's going to kill him. The master says he's already dead. He can't be killed. And if Kim's bothered, why doesn't he just kill himself again? Oh right, he can't even die if he wants to. He calls him a zombie and says that from now on, his name is Zombie. Later they go outside. The spirit reminds him that aside from perseverance, he has no other talent. He'd like to start with the basics, but even that's too much. Somehow he's below beginner level. It's been 4 days since Kim copied the Sword Throne ability from the Sword Saint and killed Yoon again. And he's been avoiding the Sword Saint as much as possible. The master says that in terms of potential, Kim is like a bottomless black hole. That's so awesome he feels jealous. Gong runs, telling him not to distract him while he's sweating. Anne thinks that right now he's following a training routine made by his spirit guardian. The master says that's why he needs special assistance, and to get it, he'll need to pay for high-level tutoring. They're going to win the lottery. There's a guild called Sangryun, officially named the Merchant Union. The guildmaster is a rank 3 hunter countess. She's the only one with a skill that allows trading with the outside world. Thanks to that, the Sangryun Guild holds a monopoly over the tower's economy. An attendant thanks them for visiting Sangryun and asks how he can help. It has become the only place in all of Babylon where you can play the lottery. The protagonist says he came to collect his lottery winnings. The attendant says he won the Sangryun Joy Lottery and congratulates him. Kim says it was nothing. The spirit says he's always been curious and asks if Kim knows why they always wear cat ears. Gong quietly says he heard the guildmaster is a cat woman. The master says she loves cats so much, she forces normal people to wear cat ears. She's definitely a pervert. The attendant asks if he checked the date because you can't claim a prize from a ticket bought 2 years ago. The protagonist thinks that was the first thing he did after getting the spirit guardian and says it's fine. He bought it last week. The sword spirit said he'd need startup capital, so he tried to win the lottery at least once. The attendant confirms and asks to see his documents. The receptionist is surprised when he sees that the winner came in first place. He asks if that means first place. People nearby start paying attention. The master says making money is easy. The attendant confirms the number and asks if they can wait a moment while he calls the manager. Kim tells him to relax. The spirit asks what he'll do if he gets mugged in an alley or something. Gong quietly thinks that before returning to this time, Yoon had already used that skill to win the lottery a few times. Because of that, he learned a few things. It's not something you can hide, even if you try, and if it gets exposed, the best thing is to explain everything. If a winner is attacked, the one who suffers most from the consequences will be the Sangryun Guild. The manager thanks him for waiting and introduces himself as Arthur Taylor, also known as the Vault Guardian. He says Kim is free to call him by that nickname. The protagonist gives his name and says the nickname suits the guild well. He thinks if this guy has a nickname, then he must be at least a rank 300 hunter. The manager laughs and says he hears that a lot and invites him to the upper floors. Kim thinks that normally an F rank like himself would never get close to someone high ranking, but today is different. He's a customer worth 50,000 G. The spirit says he's impressed way too easily just because he's never received treatment like this, and even got emotional last night when he praised his talent. The protagonist wonders if it's possible to just shut up. The spirit says he shouldn't be so impressionable, and should look at him as an example, believing that all people in the world exist to be trampled by him. Kim wonders if everyone with Emperor in their name is a psychopath, because he never wants to be like them. The manager asks if there's a problem. Gong replies that it's nothing, he just lost focus for a moment. Arthur says that's a relief. He seemed worried and was wondering if someone had treated him badly before arriving there. The protagonist, eyes full of tears, wonders if Arthur is an angel. The spirit calls him an idiot. The manager says this is the VIP room, and it's the prize he won, 53,000 in gold. Kim thinks that where he comes from, that amount in gold is worth about $5 million. With all that money, he could live comfortably for the rest of his life. If his goal was to be successful, then he's already achieved it. Arthur says he can either take it all or store it in the Sangryun Guild vault and asks what he wants to do. Gong is distracted, thinking that he decided to reign in this tower as a hunter, so earning money was just a small step. And he's already seen gold more beautiful than this and says he'll keep it in the Sangryun vault. Arthur says it was a wise choice and is what he recommends to all winners. He understands they might want to carry the money with them, but there are bad people. He then says he wants to buy an honorary member title from the Sangryun Guild, and it costs 10,000 G to become a second-class honorary member, which he'll pay in advance. The manager asks if he isn't part of any guild. The protagonist replies that he isn't. The spirit says he's smarter than he thought. A guild isn't just a group of friends or hunters. The biggest reason people join a guild is because they want protection, and he really is clever. Kim smiles and thinks there are guards in the Hunter Association, but the city is too wild to trust either of those organizations. That's clear by how the Flame Emperor and the Holy Sword eliminated him. The Flame Emperor never joined a guild and always prided himself on his freedom. He hit the jackpot twice, but probably never paid any protection fee to anyone. Someone of his level refusing to join guilds really irritated others. That's why he was almost poisoned, and Kim doesn't want to worsen his situation with the major guilds. He won't be as foolish as the Flame Emperor, and he says he has one more thing. Arthur says he understands. Anything else? Gong says he wants a cheap room for one person and will pay the rent now. He asks if they can find him a nice place to stay. And if any newspaper asks who the first prize winner was, they can say it was an anonymous honorary member of the Sangryun Guild. The manager stares at him and says he's well prepared. The spirit laughs and says to look at his face, he probably thought he was a beast. The protagonist agrees and says the world is a dangerous place and they must be prepared, and wonders who called him a beast anyway. The master asks if he said that because he doesn't remember. Arthur says he's right. Kim thinks that Emperor is an idiot. The spirit says he's doing very well on his own and thought he'd have to change his diapers. Gong mutters that he'd hate him a little less if he just stayed quiet. The master says he seems quite happy. The protagonist says, of course, this is just the beginning, and thinks of 4,000 ends, going back 4,000 days in time, the power he couldn't savor before due to his focus on revenge. Now it's time to enjoy it. The two walk outside and the spirit calls him and asks if he ever mentioned that tutorials are the most important part of his lessons, and says that now he has enough to pay for them, and asks what he thinks the next step is. Kim asks if it's finding a competent teacher. The master replies that he already has one right in front of him, and they are the books, scrolls to teach him martial arts or potions to improve his physical abilities. But at his level, he won't learn anything just from reading scrolls, so the only things he can get are extremely good potions. The protagonist asks how good they have to be. The spirit thinks for a moment, then says they used to call that place the Alchemy Castle because there were many healers and alchemy there, and he needs something made by the best person from there, and he knows a shop where he can get it. Kim asks if those things aren't super expensive. The master says of course and asks if he wants to know how much they cost. The spirit whispers in his ear and Gong is left speechless. He says wait, he'll only be able to get about 4 bottles with his entire fortune. And the master says he could probably get 5 if he makes a good deal. And if things are going badly, then he can blame himself for having no talent, and to shut up and follow him. The protagonist tells him to slow down and the master stops. Kim asks why he suddenly stopped like that. The spirit tells him to hide. He forgot to mention something. Gong looks surprised, and someone approaches. He hides immediately. The spirit says that this is the shop where the old man also buys potions, and the protagonist wonders why he didn't say that earlier. He should have mentioned that from the start. Marcus stops, looks to the side, but Kim is hiding behind the trash bin. He wonders what to do, thinking it'll be a pain if he gets caught there. The sword saint turns and leaves. The pressure in the air intensifies, and Gong says that of all places to hide, they had to pick a trash bin. The master says that's terrible. If the old man is there, then he probably came to buy all the potions. And they need to follow him quickly. When the spirit looks, he shouts no and says they're too late and asks what they're going to do. He says this is the best shop in the area. The protagonist thinks it would be too risky to use the same shop as the sword saint. He checks the hunter rankings on his phone and says he's not in the top 20, not even in the top 100, not even in the top 300. They're not there. The master asks who is, and if that's his lucky break. Kim says no, it's actually kind of the opposite, and he doesn't think they need to spend as much money as the master said. They can get those potions really cheap, He knows a great alchemist. They head to another place, and the spirit asks if he knows he's stepping into a very strange place. The people there stare at him. Gong accidentally steps in a puddle but keeps walking. The master asks if a decent alchemist lives in a place like this. The protagonist says she's not just decent, she's a once-in-a-generation genius. The spirit tells him to stop talking nonsense and asks why a genius would live in a place like this. Kim says, believe it or not. The people keep staring, and Gong thinks they were trying to see if he was worth robbing, but gave up because they saw him talking to himself and thought he was crazy. He wonders what they say if they knew how much money he had in his pockets. The master asks if he knows how to get to that person's house. Then a voice says not to take the equipment, and the person next to them asks how many times he's already said that. The protagonist says it looks like they came to the right place, and the voice says she's more than 6 months behind on rent and needs to pay her bills. The woman says if they take her equipment, she won't be able to survive. The man says it doesn't matter, she'll never make enough money to pay him anyway. They can take everything they find. The woman begs for 1 more week or just 5 days. The man says last time that 1 week became a month, and now it's been over 6. The woman holds onto the cart and says there are still some potions she hasn't finished. The bald man pushing the cart grumbles and asks why he was assigned to deal with this crazy alchemist. She gets shoved and falls to the ground. The bald man says if she wants advice, she should go do something else. Voices say they figured that shop would go bankrupt soon. The prices were too high and ask what kind of strength potion costs 40G, and say that kids these days don't know how to run a business. The alchemist says the prices weren't high at all, she barely made any profit on them. It's impossible to find potions of that quality and price anywhere in Babylon, and they should be grateful she opened a shop in this crappy place. The people say look how crazy she is. Better to leave, this girl thinks too highly of herself. The alchemist tells them to wait and asks if they don't want to buy a special strength potion since they're already there. They reply that they already said they're not buying anything. The spirit asks if that loser is the generational genius he talked about. The protagonist asks what if she is. The master asks if he's blind. Kim walks up to her and asks politely if her shop is still open, and thinks that obviously this woman isn't some crazy alchemist or loser, and says that if the shop is still open, he'd like to place a very expensive order. This is the master alchemist who will reach level 5 in the future and become the leader of the alchemist's castle. The alchemist responds that of course she can make anything he needs, and asks how expensive this item he wants to order is. Gong replies that he's not sure, and asks what if it's around 20,000. She's surprised, and the protagonist wonders what if he could form connections with top rankers before they reach the top. He thinks she'll be his golden goose and asks what's wrong, and if she doesn't accept his order, thinking he'll become her #1 customer. The alchemist says it's kind of messy, but he can come in. She opens the door, the place is way too messy. The two look surprised. And the spirit says this place looks like a dump and asks if he really wants potions made by her. The alchemist asks if he's really going to pay 20,000. Kim says if she doesn't believe him, should he pay in advance? She replies that he doesn't have to do that. Actually, if possible, an advance payment would be. Gong thinks she's so broke she can't even be polite and tells her to take however much money she needs from his vault. He'll notify Sang-ryun in advance. The alchemist asks how much she should take. The protagonist replies of course, but tells her not to go too far over the original 20,000 budget. His resources aren't unlimited. The alchemist takes out her notebook and asks what kind of potions he wants to buy. And if he wants to pay her to make illegal drugs, she'll have to decline. That's the only thing she won't make. Even though her shop just got shut down, she still has the courage to turn down thousands of gold. Despite seeming crazy, she fits the role of a master alchemist perfectly. Kim says not to worry, they're not drugs, and he swears. The alchemist is relieved and asks what kind of potion exactly he wants to order. The master says she doesn't seem that skilled, but he'll give her the recipe. And to listen carefully, he'll only explain once. Liver of a rabbit pig, eyes of a balloon cat, skin of a giant desert worm, and a tail of a mud lizard, totaling 23 ingredients. The spirit says those are the ingredients. Now, in terms of production, everything depends on the alchemist's skills. The alchemist says those ingredients together produce a potion to increase his reaction time. It's a very high-level recipe. To make it, you need to mix all the ingredients at once instead of refining them one by one. The master says that's correct, and the protagonist confirms it. The alchemist says, of course. And usually the skin of a giant desert worm has a small amount of poison. One way to counter that poison is by consuming rabbit pig liver. But depending on how it's consumed, the effects can actually be worse. On the other hand, if it were refined, Kim thinks that someone like her really exists. The alchemist says that instead, there are other side effects that follow. Forcing an increased metabolism is essential. Gong asks how long it will take to prepare it. The alchemist replies that it's 4 days. As long as she has enough money, she can make it in 4 days. Normally, she could do it faster, but she'll need to buy all her equipment back. Gong remembers a guard saying that those with a prescription from the master can go in, and people begin arguing for being let in front, saying they've been waiting over a year. In the present time, the protagonist says 4 days is nothing. They step outside, and the spirit says he doesn't approve of her, and asks if Kim knows how many people out there have a silver tongue but horrible skills. He says those types of people become major scammers in the future and they just spent a good chunk of money. Kim asks where he learned that recipe. The master replies that it was a potion he created himself. It's the best recipe he came up with after drinking all kinds of potions. Gong says she praised the recipe as high level, and he saw she immediately understood its value, so they should try trusting her. Even if she's in this state now, she'll become the head of the alchemy castle in 10 years. The spirit says to mark his words. He bets she'll take his money and run. 4 days later, the alchemist shows up with 4 boxes and says she's really sorry that she wanted to deliver it sooner, but it took longer than expected to combine all the different ingredients. At the residence provided by Sung Ryun, the protagonist asks if she didn't already say it would take 4 days and says it's fine. The alchemist says inside are 3 boxes with 30 potions each. Kim says that should count as 30 days of work and thinks this was 15 times more efficient than buying from the shop the guardian spirit suggested. That's how you should spend money. The master asks if Kim was insulting him in his thoughts. Gong answers yes. The alchemist says it might be strange to ask this now and asks why he placed such a valuable order with an unknown alchemist like her, and says that even though she's confident in her skills, just looking at the recipe, she thinks there are only 2 people in all of Babylon capable of making it. But people treat her like she's crazy. The protagonist thinks the reason is because the pharmacist in front of him is the genius of the generation, and wonders if that's really the only reason. He thinks about how she was the first to rush into the city when the fire broke out. Someone who wasn't fooled by the Flame Emperor. She's skilled, kind, and has good judgment, and he wonders if it wouldn't be a huge waste not to get closer to someone like her. He says it's because she seems kind, and he helped her because she seems kind, and he believes she'd succeed even without his help. He thinks that good hunters like themselves need to succeed, so they can help each other even more in the future. It's frustrating to see only crazy psychopaths succeed. He just wishes the best for them both, and he thinks everything he just said is true. He couldn't be more honest than that. The alchemist says it's true, and that they need to become successful to change the world. And if he ever has another order, he can contact her anytime. She'll always prioritize his requests. The protagonist says he couldn't be happier. He waves goodbye. The spirit comments about good hunters like ourselves, and says he knows that was something embarrassing to say, but they should get to training already. The next day, moving to the hunting fields on the 3rd floor, there are monsters in the forest, and Kim says these guys are a bit too strong for him, and asks what he should do. The master tells him to first drink the potion. Gong opens the container and drinks. He says the taste is normal, has a hint of lemon, and thinks he tasted a bit of honey too. Then he starts to feel something strange, a weird sensation, and wonders what's happening. The pressure in the air intensifies. He starts sweating cold. The spirit says it's impressive, so her skills were really legit. The protagonist wonders what he's saying and thinks there's no need to repeat. It feels like his head is going to explode. The master asks what the sensation is like and says it must feel like he can count every strand of hair on his head. Even the sweat on his face feels alive. Those are the effects of the potion. It enhances perception of reality. He asks if Kim can feel it. Kim asks what he's talking about. This thing squeezing his heart. His heartbeat speeds up. Energy surrounds Gong. The spirit says it's aura. It exists inside every hunter who enters the tower, but most can't even sense it. How freely one can control this aura will be the deciding factor. The protagonist holds both ears. The master continues saying normally you'd feel the flow by meditating in that state, but that takes too long. And if he doesn't have talent, he at least needs to work hard. If he doesn't want to get screwed, he better release the aura. Someone like him needs hands-on training. Kim calls him a crazy ghost. The spirit says he doesn't understand what Kim is saying and why he's a loser who can't even use aura. He asks if it hurts and says if he doesn't like it, he can just get eliminated already. Even if he did get eliminated, his death counter would just go up again, and bets the old man would be thrilled to see him. What does he think? The monster moves, rushing at him and attacking. Gong thinks so, that's the potion's effect. Even if he can see the attacks, he wonders why his body won't respond properly. The spirit says he can dodge, not to give up. Orcs are low-level monsters with simple attack patterns. It'll be easy once he learns them. Now he needs to gather aura in his legs. The protagonist thinks that's easy to say. He can dodge if he just takes one more step. He moves. His heart races. As he runs, energy flows through his body. He keeps running and the monster continues chasing. Kim manages to dodge and the master asks if it's harder than expected. He says that's because Kim doesn't have the proper channels for aura to flow through his body. As a metaphor, his body is like a small mountain path. Needs to be turned into a highway for aura to flow smoothly. And he can feel aura now thanks to the potion because normally he'd just be a loser. That girl might have low hygiene standards, but her skills are really good. The monster lets out a loud sound. The protagonist asks what'll happen once that little path becomes a highway, and thinks it's frustrating, but the guardian spirit is right. An abandoned path covered in debris really fits his current self. He wonders what he could do to overcome that, and asks what might happen. The master smiles, and he says he had his head decapitated by old man Marcus without being able to do anything in response. Kim says that's exactly what happened. The spirit says that was a skill you don't just see on anyone around here. Gong wonders if even that beautiful strike. The master continues saying the old man still has a long way to go, and as for Kim, there's not even a need to comment. The protagonist pauses for a moment, and when the orc is about to strike him, Kim quickly moves and releases his aura around his body. The spirit watches closely and says, "That was pretty creative." Gong grabs his sword and leaps toward his opponent, his image reflected in the enemy's eyes. The protagonist attacks, and the master warns him not to lower his guard until the end, because orcs have tough skin. He says that if Kim can concentrate aura at the tip of the blade, it might be too hard for him, so just try to transfer all the aura to the tip. Kim keeps attacking his opponent with all his strength and aura, then he raises his blade and strikes the opponent's eye. The spirit asks if it hurts, and says if it doesn't, then it definitely hurts like hell, because Kim didn't create a proper channel for it and still used aura like that. He bets Kim feels like he's going to get eliminated because of his weak body, and ruined it trying to take down a simple orc. But that move of compressing the aura like a blast at the end of the fight was pretty cool, and he has to praise him for that. A hunter must always use his head in battle. Gong feels terrible and says it wasn't good for him. The master asks if he really thinks he's going to die. The protagonist says he must be blind. The spirit says he'll be fine even if he loses his life. If it weren't for a revival skill, he wouldn't suggest this training method. Even old man Marcus meditates after drinking this potion. He doesn't use his body that carelessly. Kim thinks this ghost is a bastard. The spirit says that every time he dies, he can return. Isn't that amazing? No matter how tough the training is, his body will always go back to normal. He says he's jealous. And since Kim's death counter increases every time he's eliminated, they'll try to avoid that. But now that Kim figured out how to use aura on his first try, maybe just 100 deaths will be enough. A journey starts with one step, and 100 deaths start with the first. Then an orc appears behind him, ready to strike. The system notifies that his life has been lost. The protagonist says his head hurts. The master asks what this place is. Kim asks if he's there too, and says this is where you go briefly after dying. For now, he'll call it purgatory, and after a while, he'll hear a message saying he'll return 24 hours in time, just like when he was killed by the Flame Emperor and the Holy Sword. The system notifies that the conditions for the activation of the ability have been met due to elimination. Gong says a skill was also copied. More notifications pop up saying it's copying a random skill from the orc. Both are frozen for a moment. The protagonist asks if monsters have skills too. The spirit says his ability is totally broken. The system notifies him to choose a skill card. The master asks who the hell is supervising this tower, and why the hell they gave a busted skill like that to a loser like him, and not to a top hunter like himself. He says this will mess up the entire hunter balance. Kim thinks about a monster's skill. He'll just pick one at random. The spirit tells him to wait and asks if he's really going to pick that one. Gong asks what the problem is, saying it's not like it really matters which one he chooses. The master asks if it wouldn't be better to pick the best option while he has a choice. The protagonist replies that there's no way to know which skill is best. They're both crap-colored, it's just a luck game. The master asks what he means he can't tell which one is better. Kim asks if he's seriously not getting it and says the cards are the same color and he can only see their backs. How could he possibly know which skill is better? The spirit says he can see what's written on them, on the front. More notifications come up, asking him to choose a skill card. Gong thinks the skill cards always move so that the back is facing him, and they stay that way no matter how he tries to turn his head for a peek. And he wonders if the spirit can actually read the content of those cards, and thinks that since the spirit can fly freely, that's why he can see both sides. The master replies of course he can see and asks if Kim doesn't trust his eyes. He says he's always been known for having great vision since childhood. When he grew up, he even obtained true sight. The protagonist shouts excitedly. The spirit asks if he lost his fear of being eliminated and why he screamed like that out of nowhere. Kim says just to tell him what the abilities are. The master replies that he got it and he'll read them only once, so he better pay attention. Card 1. Nature gives a place to call home, but also puts them through hardships. In this harsh world, orcs increase their chances of reproduction and refuse to lose to nature. And if an orc dies, don't worry. Somewhere unseen, there are 9 more of them, but you'll be aroused all year long. Card 2. They always add teach week at the end of their sentences, teach week. They don't know why they do this, but you'll also end up doing it, teach week. And then, you'll never escape the fun of the teach week forever. Gong looks surprised. The spirit says, see? And that if he hadn't stopped him, he might have ended up with the teach week. Now, since he's a man, doesn't he think it'd be good to obtain orc virility? The protagonist says he's full of crap and thinks both cards are awful, but if he had to choose, he'd go with the teach week. The master says his thoughts and his words don't seem to match. Kim says either way he thinks it's right, and teach week is better than the blessing of reproduction. The spirit tells him to wait and think it through a bit more. Gong says it seems like he's thinking the same thing as him. More notifications pop up confirming the selection is complete and the skill is being copied. The master screams, "No," and the protagonist screams, "Yes." Then Kim appears in his room and the system notifies that he is currently a rank F hunter. There is no penalty for using the ability. Gong says that's great, and that Sangryun really is the best guild. There's nothing like being in a comfy place to rest your mind and body. The spirit grumbles and says he thought Kim would fall for it. The protagonist asks who the hell would pick the blessing of reproduction and tells him to stop whining and get back to hunting. He opens his status window and checks his stats, and Kim says he sees no issues. The master tells him to really think about it and says it's better if he trains sitting in the lotus position. Getting eliminated is way too painful. They'll take it slow and train lotus style, and that way he'll master aura in just half a year. Kim says let's go to the 3rd floor hunting grounds, and he starts moving there. The master asks if he's even listening. Gong drinks the potion and says it's delicious, asking if the master knew. The spirit asks if he wants to train in the lotus position. The protagonist says he only calls him a zombie when he's doing well and Gong when he's struggling. And just now he called him Gong, so he's warning him to fix that habit. Kim approaches a monster. The orc looks confused. Then its movements begin to slow down. The protagonist thinks, as expected, its movements are slowing again. The monster raises its weapon. Kim says, "Tichweek." The orc, confused, tilts its head and asks about Tichweek. Gong replies, "Tichweek." The monster freezes, and the protagonist closes in with his sword and slashes its neck. Plasma sprays, and the orc collapses to the ground. Kim feels relieved. The spirit calls him a damn little thief and says he knew this would happen. He asks if Kim's happy tricking a poor orc like that. Didn't he stop to think about the monster's feelings? He says innocent orcs in this world are being hurt by rotten humans like him. Gong says, "Tichweek." The master insults him and says he feels like beating him up, and asks why the Great Tower gave such a busted ability to a loser like him. The protagonist tells him to knock it off and follow him. They need to clear the 4th floor. 1 week later, a monster is observing something. It's the Goblin King, and Kim stands before him. He closes his eyes and activates his ability. Aura flares around his body. Gong says, "Goruk." The king asks, "Goruk?" and wonders how someone other than himself can speak the king's language so perfectly. The protagonist attacks and says he was the strongest enemy he faced that week. He tells him to rest in peace and calls him an honorable opponent. The spirit says he's a damn liar and asks why he's so emotional after defeating just one monster. Kim calls him a bastard and says he beat him after using 6 coins. Can't he be a little emotional? The master says he's just stating facts and asks if that really counts as an honorable battle. Gong opens the system and says, "Look, he fought fair using a skill that cost 5 life coins." It's kind of amazing that even goblins care about such useless things. The spirit says that's exactly why they're goblins, and that humans aren't much different. The protagonist asks what that was. The master replies he was just talking to himself. Kim wants to know what he means by that. The system notifies that the existence is becoming more defined. A great light is emitted. More notifications arrive saying the hunter is leveling up. Gong thinks, finally, and messages appear stating that skill slots have increased, and he is now a rank E hunter. May luck be on your side. The spirit asks if that was sparks or plasma droplets and says it was confusing. The protagonist asks if that was a level up effect. The spirit says it wasn't just for show, it was a kind of clue. Kim asks what kind of clue. The master explains that it's possible to discover the form of aura he'll possess based on the effects that appear when he levels up. For example, that flame emperor he eliminated, he bets his aura was fire. Gong says he saw sparks. The spirit says any hunter's aura takes shape after some kind of trauma. It's not always a bad memory, but it's always based on a moment or event that defined their life. This is reflected in the form of the aura and is likely a subconscious effect. Based on what he saw, Kim's aura is either fire or plasma. The protagonist asks what the aura form of the holy sword is. The master replies, "It's moonlight. When that old man was a boy, he got lost in the mountains. He didn't want to die, so he climbed to the top of one. He said the moon in the bright sky looked absolutely beautiful. The moon doesn't shine by its own power, but reflects the light of the sun. Yet a life where he only receives is still beautiful. He just wanted to shine like the moon. That's what he thought when he was 12, and he's held onto that belief ever since." Kim thinks the holy sword is definitely not normal. The spirit says they've cleared the 5th floor and are heading to the 6th. Gong asks if they can just skip straight to the boss on the 10th floor. The master asks if he's getting full of himself already even though he's a newbie. The protagonist swears that's not it. The spirit asks if he knows how many years some of the best hunters have wasted on the 10th floor. Kim replies that if he can't clear the 10th floor with 2 coins, he promises he'll start calling the spirit Master. The master asks if he's saying he can defeat the boss after just 1 elimination. He had to use 6 coins to beat the Goblin King and thinks he can pass the 10th floor boss with only 2? He says Kim clearly doesn't know his place, but even so, he won't go easy on him. Gong says fine, but there's one condition. He has to be honest and tell him what skills the 10th floor boss has. The spirit says that seems fair. The protagonist adds, and if he wins, the master has to call him in the most respectful way possible. He asks what's wrong, if he wants to back out, and says it's fine if he does. The master calls him a damn brat and asks if he really thinks he can challenge the great sword emperor just because he has a busted ability. He tells him to be ready to treat him as master for the rest of his life, because he won't beat the 10th floor boss. And it's true, since he can't lose his life, he'll have to call him master forever. Kim asks if he's going crazy and says the one who's going to serve is him. The two glare at each other, then burst into laughter. People around them see Gong laughing alone and say they think he's insane. Somewhere else, a guard says he can't enter. The protagonist asks why not. The guard asks if he's trying to challenge the boss alone and says that's suicide. He asks if Kim didn't see the news. Black Dragon Guild went in with 34 elite members and still failed. Kim replies that the association rules say any hunter can start a raid. The guard says he's sorry, but he has to report everyone who enters and his superiors will review those logs later. He'll end up being the heartless bastard who let someone take their own life, so Kim should consider his position too. The master asks about this hunter association, saying in his world, there was no such thing, and dealing with this political crap is exactly why they're still stuck on the 10th floor. He tells Kim to just beat the guy up and go in already. Kim calls to the guard and says he appreciates the hard work and what the guard said is true. And to be honest, he truly does want to take his own life. The guard looks shocked, and the spirit is confused. Gong says that a year ago he lost his beloved, and recently the Alchemy Castle told him he has an incurable disease. They say he has 6 months at most to live, but he can't go on living without his beloved. And even though he's just a low-tier hunter, he'd rather use the rest of his life to challenge a monster than be stuck in a bed at the Alchemy Castle. The guard gets emotional and says it's a tragic story. The protagonist hands him a pouch and says it's the money he had saved for his treatment. The guard says he can't accept it. Kim says that since he's going to disappear anyway, he wants to leave this world without anything left behind, and asks him not to file any report about his entry either. This is his final request as a hunter. The guard says he understands and tells him to go ahead. He didn't see anything. The spirit says they're both idiots and asks if they're filming a movie or something. Gong wonders if, ever since reaching the 10th floor, the methods even matter anymore. On the 10th floor, the protagonist thinks this was a floor meant to be cleared by the Flame Emperor. Now he'll write his own legend, and it'll be even greater than his. He opens the door and is met with several dolls with red eyes. They scream, and the room ignites in flames. They ask if he came to play. They invite him to play, asking what they should play, maybe statues. Then say the statues might melt. Better to play hide and seek. They say that's it. Come play with him. Kim begins releasing aura around his body and tells them to play. The system notifies that elimination be on his side. Elsewhere, Black Dragon, the guild known as the strongest since the tower opened, has unfortunately reached its 30th raid failure today. Reporters ask what they think caused another failure. Black Dragon replies there's nothing wrong with their skills, they just had some bad luck. The Flame Emperor asks who said that. He says luck is also a skill and calls them losers. The protagonist thinks this is the interview that became known as the Declaration of the Losers, and that's the real issue, surpassing all the great hunters. He wonders why the Flame Emperor was the only one who managed to clear the 10th floor. The system notifies that the boss stage is beginning. The dolls ask if he wants to play and promise it'll be fun. Kim thinks clearing the 10th floor is relatively simple. Hidden somewhere in the mansion, the dolls ask if it's the real one and say to come find her. There, he must destroy the real doll. The spirit says those aren't just flames, they're hellfire created with aura. Gong thinks it doesn't matter how much you protect yourself with aura. 10 minutes is the absolute limit anyone can withstand those flames. But they'd have no effect on aura users with fire-type affinity. The protagonist recalls the Flame Emperor going through this floor. That's why he could clear it safely, and still had the nerve to say that luck is a skill. The spirit says Kim is just a zombie who survives by luck. Kim asks what he means by surviving by luck and tells him to look. He can barely withstand this with his aura. The master says he'll reach his limit in 1 minute. For the record, old man Marcus can withstand these flames for 30 minutes. He's training like hell right now to push that to 1 hour before facing this boss, unlike someone who showed up here with no plan at all. Gong says he's really happy to hear that. The dolls say, "Come find us." The spirit asks what he's going to do with just 2 coins. The protagonist asks what he means and says he'll die first and figure something out later. The master asks if he really thinks his aura will evolve exponentially just because he dies here. He says there are only 2 ways to clear this place. Find the right doll instantly, a 1 in a million chance, or become so skilled with aura that he can last long enough to find the correct one. And even knowing that, Kim bet on just 2 coins like an idiot. He says Kim won't make it. Kim says he's forgetting option 3. He'll see who wins after he's eliminated. He thinks his aura will run out in 10 seconds and wonders why not just pick one at random. Gong stares at a doll. She turns and asks if he wants to play with her. The protagonist approaches her, opens the doll's mouth. She starts melting, saying she's not the real one, and her entire body melts. Kim thinks he has 3 seconds left and wonders if they really had to go this far. The master asks how anyone could possibly understand the Great Tower. He says the tower is a psychopath that gives a busted skill to a loser like him. Gong asks if he really needs to say it like that. Things around begin to break. The protagonist starts to burn. The spirit says time's up, and that Kim's a pervert trying to deceive the tower. Kim thinks he's burning and wants to be eliminated faster. The master says no matter what kind of great hunter he wants to be, creating a plan that involves burning until death on purpose. He has to admit Kim really is a pervert. The system notifies that he was eliminated, and the conditions for activating the ability have been fulfilled by elimination. Copying random ability from the infernal dolls. Gong asks if he hasn't forgotten the promise. The master replies that he remembers, so don't worry, and asks if he looks like the kind of loser who'd break a promise. And this one is incredible. It has to be this one. No need to say anything, just take it. That's the only rank S ability this boss even has. And whenever he wants, the hellfire from earlier will appear. Then he asks why Kim is acting that way and if something's wrong. The protagonist replies, no. It's just that for some reason, he feels like something's off. He remembers the doll saying she wasn't the one. Kim thinks it's definitely a great ability, but something doesn't feel right to him. He says either way, just read the other abilities. The spirit says he doesn't get it, but fine. Labyrinth Architect rank A, Puppet Master rank B, Remote Control rank B, Trap Installation rank C. The last one is Gong waits, and the master looks at it with a strange face. The protagonist says just what he thought. The spirit says to wait and listen. Kim says it's fine. He already figured out what kind of ability that is. The master says, look at this, a golden card, so epic. And if he picks this one, hellfire barriers will emerge. It doesn't matter who it is, this skill will attract anyone. Gong thinks no, this is the card he really wanted. He says he knew something was weird. Among the tens of thousands of them, only one doll is real. The real one wouldn't burn since it has fire aura. And he asks why the fake dolls weren't burning either. He says he has an answer. The protagonist looks at the skill, only he can prevent the fire. He thought there would be an ability that helped selected targets not get burned. The spirit says what a shitty game. Kim laughs and says to repeat that with him. The system notifies that he will return 24 hours in time and is currently a rank E hunter. Gong says now he can go back and take a relaxed tour through the mansion until he finds the real doll and asks what to do now because it just got too easy. The system notifies that he received a penalty from the skill and is recreating the trauma of an opponent that eliminated him. Starting penalty, recreating trauma from monster infernal dolls. Somewhere else, a child knocks on someone's door and says they're hungry, asking if they could have a piece of bread, even just the crumbs. The man slams the door and asks why he has to see homeless kids first thing in the morning. The child walks away, still asking for just a piece of bread, saying it's okay if it's moldy. People ask if there haven't been too many homeless kids around lately, saying food is scarce and the kids are annoying. The child keeps begging for a bit of bread, and the residents ask where all these kids are coming from, wondering if someone can take them away or something. The child stops in front of a man and says they're sorry. The man touches his head and asks if he doesn't have parents. He says the boy looks hungry and asks if his body hurts too, and tells him to come along. They go to another place, and the man says he's a doctor and has many friends at home for the boy to play with. He'll help him feel better. The child thanks him and calls him kind. He ends up locked in a cage, hands in chains, asking when he can go out to play and saying he's hungry. The man says to be patient, that only animals give in to urges. Just because he was born from a beast doesn't mean he has to be raised as one. The doctor pulls him by the chains, holding a dagger in the other hand, and says he knows orphans like him well. They don't work, claiming they're too young, and go around spreading disease from village to village. He says he's a good man for getting rid of children like him. Somewhere else, orphans are in cages, and someone says the hunger they're feeling now was caused by these orphans. They're children of witches, poison to the land, filth of society. They'll be sacrificed to the gods to save this land. The child looks terrified, eyes full of tears. Hooded elders say to eliminate them all. In another place, a voice says the number of sacrifices is decreasing, and they need to find more for the next ritual. The orphans ask where their friends are being taken and why they keep getting hurt. The protagonist approaches the place and asks what the hell this is, and if he's seeing it too. The master says he's been there since the beginning and didn't know Kim came too. Kim says he thinks they're both like spirits now. The spirit says that isn't really the important part, and he asks what kind of crap that is over there, and who he's telling to repent. Gong replies that this is probably the origin of the 10th floor boss, and he had no idea monsters used to be human. The system says it's now recreating the trauma of his eliminator. The master says not all monsters, usually just the bosses. They're based on real-life events from different worlds. They're all heroes or life forms from other worlds, and that becomes more common from the 11th floor onward. The protagonist asks why he didn't tell him that earlier. The spirit responds that he never asked, but it's the first time he's ever seen an origin. They hear voices saying they're hungry, asking if anyone's there. The master says he knew they were from another world, but there was no way to know exactly what happened. It's different seeing it with your own eyes. A butler approaches and ends up tripping, dropping a candle. Kim looks shocked. and wonders how this always happens somewhere in every world. The flames start spreading and people begin running, shouting to get out of the mansion, telling others to grab all valuable items before leaving. Gong says wait. He tries to stop them and asks if they really think now is the time to run. He says the children are still in the basement. One of the children wonders about more cruelty and says no, asking if anyone is there and saying it's so hot. The fire spread. The children say they didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't want to die of hunger. They just wanted to play with friends. They just wanted to play a little more. The system notifies that trauma recreation is complete, penalty ending. In the present time, the protagonist appears in his room. They're silent until the spirit says he knows it's a sad situation, but there's nothing they can do now. Kim asks if that's really the first thing he's going to say. The master replies yes, and that he has a shitty personality, and asks what Kim expects to do, because that's how the real world works. That boss now is just a monster, and those children from the origin are already gone and have been for a long time, and asks what Kim could possibly do about it. He says if it had happened in this tower, then Kim could have eliminated himself to save them, but it happened in another world and no one here could do anything. So now he has to find the real doll and eliminate it. Then move on to floor 11, 20, 30, 40, and 50. That's what he needs to do now that he's decided to climb the tower. And if he wants to reach the top, he'll have to do these things alone. Gong says that's probably what the Flame Emperor thought too. And Yoon would definitely find the real doll and eliminate it without hesitation, even after seeing their trauma. The spirit asks what's the problem. The protagonist replies that he doesn't want to be like that bastard. The master asks what he's going to do then. Act like a child. Is he not going to clear the floor just so he's not like him? He says he needs to defeat the boss to clear the floor and calls him a stupid zombie. Kim asks who said that and says he himself was the idiot. The spirit asks what he's talking about. Gong says he's saying he's an idiot, and so is the master. It was right under their noses and they didn't see it. He asks if the master remembers the rank S ability he wanted him to choose. The master asks who he thinks he is and says, of course he remembers. The protagonist talks about resentment, regret, vengeance, and says his endless grudge, unheard resentment, and unfulfilled wishes burn it all. As long as he wills it, an aura of hellfire will appear within a 2 kilometers radius. No one can escape this hell without his permission, no matter who they are, and asks if he doesn't think there's something wrong with that. The spirit asks what he means. What's wrong with the skill? Kim brings up the final line. No one can leave this hell without your permission, no matter who they are, and asks how the Black Dragon Guild managed to escape without killing the boss. The master replies he's not sure. Gong says there's only one possibility. The boss allowed them to leave, and thinks, a floor humanity still hasn't cleared. The dolls see him enter. The protagonist thinks there's only one thing the boss wants from its visitors. The dolls invite him to play. Kim releases his aura and tells them to play. He activates the skill. Only he can prevent the fire. The dolls say that man isn't burning, asking if he's not hot so he can play with them. The protagonist replies, yes, it's hide and seek, and tells them to get ready. He's never lost a game of hide and seek in his life. They think he's weird. Kim covers his eyes and tells them to hide well. He'll find them soon. They tell each other to hide fast. The protagonist thinks it's a game of hide and seek with children who can't go anywhere. Anne tells them to hide well. They reply that they'll hide far away, somewhere he'll never find them. Kim says, ready or not, here I come. He opens the mouth of one of them. The doll says it's not the one. The protagonist goes through several of them and still hasn't found the real one. He says it's harder than he imagined and asks about her. The doll replies, no, try again. The master looks around and says he's appeasing their spirits. The protagonist keeps searching, walking past the dolls and still hasn't found it, until there's one inside a cage. The doll watches him and asks if he's going to play with himself. Kim says he's found it and it's him. The doll begins to melt and thanks him, calling him a kind sir, and thanks him again. The system congratulates him and says the normal stage has been completed, secret stage completed, boss stage completed, and the floor has been cleared by one person, Hunter Gong. Calculating clear rewards, completed, and rewards will be claimed 24 hours after entering the 11th floor. The spirit asks why he has that look and says that clearing a secret stage is something even he barely managed, but Gong did it on his first try. He'll probably receive great rewards too. The protagonist says he doesn't understand and calls him heartless. He says he just feels like the world is shit. The scene they saw on the boss floor, things like that happen regardless of which world you're in. The master says that's just how life is. The two stay silent for a moment and the spirit says, whatever, that kind of atmosphere doesn't suit him. By the way, he's impressed. He cleared this floor in his own way. That was a compliment. Kim says he doesn't know if he believes that. The master says he knows how to recognize a great hunter when he sees one, and he cleared this floor purely with skill, not luck. Besides, they're partners, and he should be happy for him. The system announces it's a public service announcement. The 10th floor has been cleared. The 11th floor will open in 24 hours. People start writing messages asking what's going on and why there are fireworks. And if the fireworks are on every floor or just the first. A guy on the third floor says there are fireworks there too. Another anonymous person asks if anyone saw the 10th floor clear announcement, and if maybe it was the Black Dragon, and where is their announcement? Others reply that the Hunter Association said they would clear the 10th floor in 2 weeks. The spirit says it's finally time to write his own story, and that he's seen something like this in his past life. The protagonist says this is also his second time. People comment on the forum that it wasn't the Black Dragon, because their top hunters are sitting in a cafe on the first floor. Another guy says he's at the temple now, and it wasn't the Inquisitor either. Viper is teaching some students at the academy. The Paladin is working at Babylon Square. A Sang Ryun member says he can't reveal his identity, but it wasn't them either. An anonymous user asks if none of the guilds cleared it, then was it the Holy Sword? A guy responds that the Holy Sword is drinking milk next to him right now and sends a photo. People get confused, asking what that means. And if no one knows who cleared it, then who was it? They say it makes no sense. The spirit asks what it feels like to be promoted from a nobody to the main character. Kim smiles and says it feels fucking amazing. Feels like the world is his. The master tells him not to get too excited. All he did was clear the 10th floor, but he's the one closest to the top. Gong replies he knows, and all he needs to do now is get there. A guard comes running up and calls out to him, asking if he was the one who did that just now. The protagonist says he doesn't know what he's talking about. The guard asks about clearing the 10th floor and says he was the only one who entered a raid on that floor today. His superiors are going crazy. They want to know what's happening. Kim asks what if it was him. The guard says he just wants to know his name. Gong asks if that's all, even after giving him 100 gold. The guard says to at least give him a nickname. The protagonist replies he doesn't have one. The guard is shocked, and the spirit says to look at his face. He did well. That's how you become known. Hide your identity and make them work to find out. Kim says he thinks he realized something. The master asks what. Gong asks why he was cursing him earlier. Didn't he swear to call him Gong if he cleared the 10th floor with just 2 coins? Isn't it insane that he actually managed it? The spirit smiles and says, aren't they alike? And tells him to think about it. Partners should be on the same level. Him and himself, same level. Someone who cleared the 99th floor and his partner. The one who will clear the 100th. A friend in faith. A brother in arms. That's so beautiful. The protagonist tells him to move him to the first floor and says to use the suffix nim if he wants to talk to him from now on. Elsewhere, people are desperate to know who cleared the 10th floor. They keep checking the news, but nothing appears. Someone wonders if the Black Dragon is hiding the fact that they cleared it. Others think it might have been the Sword Saint. Kim is wearing headphones, drinking coffee, and asks what the Sword Emperor thinks, and if victory isn't sweet. He says he's loving this. He wonders if his headphones broke since he's not hearing any response. He tries talking to the Sword Emperor, calling him a psycho and lunatic. The spirit replies he's there. Gong says he can finally hear him again. Thought he'd gone deaf, and asks if he forgot he should call him Magnificent Lord Gongja Nim. Also, would it be weird if he kept using honorifics while the other calls him just Lord Gongja? The master gets irritated and tells him to just eliminate him, and to quickly copy a new skill and replace Throne of the Sword because he wants to return to Marcus. The protagonist says that's a joke and asks weren't they partners for life? Together forever. And thinks it's been almost an hour and a half and it's about time. Then Kim notices something. It's a cat. He thinks he can't believe someone of such high rank would come personally. He picks up the cat and thinks that nobody knows about this cat yet. He decides to act like he doesn't know either. He asks if it's lost and wants to play with him. He thinks he heard she was obsessed with cats, but this is kind of extreme. Someone approaches and politely asks if he's a hunter, calling him by name. It's a group of people. Gong shows his ID and says he was wondering how long it would take. Just an hour and a half. Each one calls on the phone saying they found him at the cafe across the street from the bank and not to worry. They won't let the other guilds get him. The blonde says it's a pleasure to meet him. He's the director of the Civilian Militia Guild and invites him to join. Another guy interrupts him, says sorry for cutting in, and asks to hear his terms first. The protagonist says first, don't reveal his name to the media. The guy asks for how long, saying reporters are going crazy. They can't hide it forever. Kim says not for long, just until that clock hits all zeros. He just doesn't want to deal with reporters while trying to get to the 11th floor. A guild leader tries to speak, and Gong says secondly, this is a public place, so let's respect the other customers. One of them rushes to the counter and says they're from the Hunter Association, asking how much it would cost to rent the cafe for an hour. His partner tells him to order drinks too, one for each person. The long-haired guy thanks them and says if he joins the Celestial Arts Guild, drinks are served at the table. The protagonist says the negotiation begins, and for them to make their offers. The blonde says the civilian militia is willing to pay 10,000 gold if he joins. The bearded guy says the militia is almost broke and offers 20,000 gold and an executive position in the Adventurers Guild. The long-haired one offers 25,000 gold and a trainer position at the Celestial Martial Arts Guild. Another says that being a trainer sucks and offers an honorary position at the Almighty God Guild. A guy invites him to be the ambassador of the Hunter Association. Kim thinks they're all desperate because of the lone wolf, the holy sword, the rank 1 hunter who doesn't belong to any guild. Someone like that makes people question the importance of guilds. And if someone of his caliber shows up out of nowhere, the cat says 500,000 and jumps off his lap, transforming into a person. It's the Countess, and she offers him the vice leader position in her guild and asks what he thinks. Gong says now that's what he calls an offer. The guildmaster says he's quite bold, not even surprised a cat turned into a woman. The protagonist replies he's used to weird things, even seeing eliminated people. The Countess laughs and says he's funny too. Kim thinks he can't believe she's over 40 and must have found a youth potion with all that money. The blonde politely asks to speak. The guildmaster tells him to go ahead. The civilian militia guild director asks if 500,000 gold and a vice leader position aren't a bit much. He admits they don't even know what abilities he has. The pressure begins to build. The Countess asks if he's done. The blonde says yes. The guildmaster tells him to go talk to his leaders then before excusing herself again. They're just not on her level, unless someone there can offer more than 500,000 gold. Someone approaches, calling the cat a bitch. The Countess says they have arrived. A few people walk in and Viper is furious, telling them to go fuck themselves. The Almighty God says he was one step ahead of them and thinks it's because he himself was too lazy. The Paladin says they were lazy and their job is to keep hunters in check. Turns out Ryunju is ridiculously fast. The Black Witch just watches. The Countess says it was about time they showed up. The protagonist looks surprised and thinks these are the top hunters of the tower. The guildmaster says it's been a while since they last met, and it feels like just yesterday they cleared the second floor together. Seems like they've gotten old. Viper tells her to shut up before he stuffs her with cat food, and asks about the 500,000 gold and vice leader position, saying he knows spending money is her hobby, but isn't vice leader a bit too much? The Inquisitor says to wait and order coffee first. It's rude to go into a shop and not buy anything, and they have to set a good example for the other hunters. He thinks he wants an espresso and asks about the rest. The Paladin says he'll order an iced tea. The Black Witch says she wants a large hot chestnut latte. The Countess wants a warm Americano, and Viper is furious, asking if the whole tower is in chaos because someone cleared the 10th floor and they want to sit around drinking coffee. Do their brains only work with caffeine? The Almighty God asks if he wants a strong espresso and says he'll take care of it. He calls the waiter saying they'd like to place an order. Viper calls him a damned believer. The waiter confirms the order: 1 espresso, 1 iced tea, 1 large chestnut latte, 1 warm Americano, and 1 strong espresso. The Inquisitor says he forgot to ask what the hunter would like. The protagonist thinks they really planned all of this. All the guild leaders came only after the executives left. This isn't a coincidence. They coordinated it to throw him off. The spirit tells him not to be scared. They're just trying to intimidate him. Kim replies that he knows, and this is nothing compared to being burned alive. He thinks what he needs to show now is composure. He asks if he can see the menu. He says he just had a macchiato, so he doesn't think he'll have more coffee now. He asks if he can have a hot chocolate. The waiter says, of course. The Almighty God says it's pretty amazing he didn't have any notable accomplishments before clearing the 10th floor, and asks if something changed. Gong thinks he could just eliminate himself and rewind time. The spirit says yes, that's his greatest strength, eliminating himself when something goes wrong. The protagonist thanks him for the support and tells him not to forget his part of the promise. The Countess says he already had one accomplishment. This young man recently won the guild lottery. He's lucky and brave, probably has some skill too. A young man with those 3 things will succeed, no matter the circumstances. Viper says they really thought someone who cleared the 10th floor would be some rookie. He warned them. Now they should stop pretending and recruit him already. No more wasting time. The Black Witch tells them to stop talking nonsense, and they can discuss this later. She asks which guild he's interested in joining, and says that if he plans not to join any, he should let them know too. They need time to prepare a media statement. Kim asks if she plans to join one. The Black Witch replies that then it's the start of a bidding war. They've already wasted too much time on the 9th floor, but thanks to him, they now have a reason to remind the outside world of the tower's value. It's a chance to gather people from all over the world. It's also motivation for the hunters stuck on the 1st floor. She asks what lies beyond the 11th floor. Curiosity is what drives people. Gong says that, at this rate, the food will run out instantly. The Black Witch agrees and says they're hitting the limit of how much food can be acquired up to the 9th floor. The Countess says that even if they keep a route to the outside world open all the time, it's still not enough. They need new products. The Black Witch says they need to encourage hunters toward the new world, pushing them to explore and find valuable things there. They need some kind of appeal to the masses outside the tower, an icon to represent the era of revolution. The protagonist thinks that's how the Flame Emperor was, and wonders if they're saying that someone is him. Anne thinks the Black Dragon tried to eliminate that icon. He doesn't know why, but if they were enemies, he'll probably get along with the Black Dragon's leader. He says he understands, and that the guild that recruits him will become the representative of the new generation of hunters, and the other guilds won't be able to do anything about it. and he'd feel bad if that happened, so he'll do this instead. He shows a deck of cards and says they're going to play a poker game. He'll join the guild of whoever wins. He doesn't need money or an executive position, but if he wins, he'll join all the guilds at once. To outsiders, he'll seem like a guild member, but he'll receive the same treatment as them. The Countess asks if he really wants to be treated like them after clearing just one floor and says she's fine with it. The Almighty God says if there's no trick involved, he's okay with it too. Viper says to ban the use of abilities or else they'll have a huge advantage. If anyone is caught using one, they're automatically out. The Paladin says their guild is too poor for a bidding war, so he's in. The Witch says they accept his terms. Very quietly, the protagonist calls the Sword Emperor and asks if he really won't call him Gongja Nim. He says he'll allow him to stop as soon as the game ends. The Spirit asks if he really will stop. Kim says in exchange he wants him to tell him what cards everyone has. The Master says that's a great deal. He also says he's as gracious as the ocean and will tell him what cards they have. The Gongja Nim is so merciful and kind. The protagonist says to start. The Spirit says the Countess has a straight and he better fold this round. So Kim throws his cards on the table. The Master says Viper is bluffing with just a pair and it's pathetic if he falls for that bluff. So Gong calls. The Spirit approaches the Paladin and says, this guy is trying to get a full house and not to worry because he stuck his head between the cards and saw the next ones. He won't make it, just trust him and they'll win. The protagonist says he's going all in. Viper gets up and asks what the hell is going on, saying this must be cheating. There's no way this is statistically possible. They've played over 30 rounds and he hasn't lost a single one. He can't even bluff. This guy is definitely cheating. Kim asks if he has proof of that and says maybe he's just a poker genius and doesn't like being accused without evidence. Viper says that's too much unbalanced wisdom and there's no way this guy is rank F. Gong asks how he knew he's not rank F and says he hadn't told the association yet, but he ranked up to E yesterday. Viper says he knew it. The protagonist thanks him for the compliment and says, by the way, looks like he ran out of chips. The Almighty God welcomes him, saying it was time to move to the loser's table, so he ordered an extra espresso for him. Enjoy it. Viper says he already said he doesn't want to drink anything. The Inquisitor says he knows, but he has to overcome temptation. The Almighty God calls him a damned believer. Later, still at the table, the Paladin says he lost and was so confident in his poker face. He asks if maybe Kim can read minds or something. Kim replies maybe he can just deal cards and asks if he's going to try guessing. The Paladin says dealing with today's youth is too hard. Viper gets up and asks why he gave up so easily, calling him a loser. He says he should have kept trying to the end and asks if he's really going to let that cheater win. The Paladin tells him not to call the new hero a cheater. Viper says he's using an ability and he guarantees it. The Paladin says everyone knew that from the start and it'd be too weird if they didn't. He asks if he really thought a rookie could challenge them in a game of luck. The Countess gets up and says she'll deal the cards. She says he basically claimed he was confident enough to win without revealing his abilities, and they accepted that challenge. The Paladin says he knows the martial arts master likes to exercise, but should use his brain sometimes too. They had nothing to lose from this game anyway. Winning would be great, but losing isn't a problem either. Viper asks, what about pride? How can they let a rookie stand on the same level as them? The Paladin says pride won't help them climb the tower. The Almighty God puts the espresso cup to the martial arts master's lips and says to drink it because he forgot to finish it. Viper tells him to go fuck himself. A voice says she's happy. The protagonist asks with what? The Black Witch replies that at least he's a sensitive person and originally came from Ukraine. To be more precise, from a place that used to be called Ukraine. After losing her family in the Civil War, she became a wanderer. Living alone sucks. Inside or outside the tower? Kim says that's true and asks what she's trying to say. He says everyone who came to the tower, especially the first generation, has a very sad story. He's also just an orphan in the tower. Meanwhile, the Spirit keeps announcing her cards. The Black Witch says that this tower is basically her home. No one here asks where you're from, and that's thanks to people like them. Even if he's from Korea, she's from Ukraine, or the celestial martial arts master is from China. None of that matters in the tower. The Countess says they can still understand each other because of the tower's blessings, and they're all equal challengers here. At least it's fairer than the outside world. The protagonist says people out there treat the tower like a dumpster. The Black Witch says just because many people say it doesn't make it true. And once that countdown hits 0, the media won't stop asking about him. Life will completely change, but she trusts that he'll handle it wisely. Kim says that sounds good enough for him. He enjoys being the center of attention. He wants everyone to admire and respect him. Just that. The Black Witch says he's very honest. Gong realizes she still has a flush and is currently at a disadvantage. He says all in and adds that he's confident and makes one thing clear. He doesn't expect to be treated this way just for clearing the 10th floor. He'll clear the 20th, 30th, 50th, and even the 100th. No matter how long it takes, he'll conquer the tower. The Countess says she respects that he has strong feelings about it, and she has no intention of fighting with them. The protagonist wonders who will be the first to climb the whole tower and be worthy of being called a hero. He says he'll consider her his rival. His goal isn't just to see the world inside the tower, but the world beyond it. Honestly, he has no idea about hunger or refugee problems there. She can feel free to use his name whenever she wants to solve those issues. However, he wants help climbing the tower. He thinks he needs to feel that sense of supremacy again. The Black Witch stays quiet, sighs, and then says she was wrong. He's exactly like the Holy Sword. Kim asks if that was a compliment. The Black Witch replies, no, she's just saying he's greedy. The Countess says the Black Dragon Guildmaster had a flush, but Gong had a full house, and he won. The protagonist says then it was a compliment and thanks her. He also says he's looking forward to the equal treatment he was promised. The Black Witch asks if they can also expect him to maintain the same level of responsibility. Kim asks if a hunter's responsibility isn't to climb the tower, and says that for that, she doesn't need to worry. The Black Witch says he's very confident for a rookie. The spirit agrees and says if shamelessness were a skill, he'd probably reach S rank in it. He also says he feels relieved. Thank God he can breathe again and he'll never call him Nim again. He calls him a damned zombie and says he never realized how beautiful that word is. Gong wonders if this guy is really the one they call the Sword Emperor and thinks it's pathetic. A voice asks if they're leaving already. The protagonist replies yes. The 11th floor is about to open and he has to get ready so he's not left behind. The Black Witch asks how he's going to prepare when he doesn't even know what's there. Kim replies that it's all acting. That's the theme from floors 11 to 20. He got an extra hint for clearing the 10th floor and that's all he knows. The Black Witch says they'll make sure to repay that favor later. Gong leaves the cafe with his master. Elsewhere, people are commenting about the official announcement and the 10th floor clear, which hasn't been revealed yet. There's a video of the Holy Sword saying it wasn't him, looking very angry as he says it. The media also hasn't released any information. Apparently, someone saw all the main guild leaders together yesterday. They ask who cleared the 10th floor. Then they say to watch, only 11 seconds left. They begin the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A great light shines and a voice says, this is a public announcement. From today, the tutorial is over. It repeats again. People start asking for the 11th floor. A woman says, to those who wish to continue climbing the tower, congratulations on clearing the infernal mansion. People ask if she's an angel or a goddess. The spirit says, of course not. That's no goddess. It's just part of the system explaining things. The protagonist asks if it's like an NPC. The woman says there's a world desperately in need of help, suffering under the Demon King's rule. The Sword Emperor says that even if a goddess exists, that's nothing more than a recording. The woman says they'll now be summoned to save humanity from extinction. Kim asks how he knows this. The woman says that if they wish to accept that destiny, just say transfer. Suddenly someone jumps from above. It's Marcus leaping over a building. The woman repeats, if you wish to accept the destiny, just say transfer. Someone below asks if it was just a hologram. An aura begins forming around the Holy Sword's head. The spirit says it's because he did exactly the same thing before. The old man says, transfer, and vanishes. Someone laughs out loud and the Almighty God steps up and says he lost first place again. What an amazing day. He hopes to see them all on the 11th floor and says, transfer. Everyone starts transferring. The woman says that those who wish to continue climbing the tower from the 11th to the 20th floor, their faith will be tested, and through that they will find an answer. It will serve as a reminder of who they truly are. That's how they must learn more about themselves. The paladin says it's a shame, and to think about it, he's not sure who created the tower, but it clearly took a lot of effort. That message was left by the creators for themselves, but no one cares. Normally, they should be in awe. The tower's existence, the abilities, all of it is a miracle in itself. But people got used to everything in the first 10 floors. The protagonist says he's more emotional than he expected. The paladin says he used to study music before coming here and asks what's wrong. Is he more attractive now that she knows his artistic side? Kim says that sounds like a tough field to find a job in, and that hurts. The Sword Emperor calls him and says to be careful because that human seems suspicious. Gong asks why, but someone interrupts him and asks if he's Mr. Gong. The protagonist widens his eyes when he looks to the side. The paladin says he probably drew their attention because of him and apologizes, but anyway, he's heading to the 11th floor now. Kim asks if that's why he came to talk to him. The paladin says he has a good eye for spotting sincerity and wanted to see what kind of person he is. Gong asks what kind of person he thinks he is. The paladin replies that the answer is in his heart and says the word transfer, vanishing from the spot. The protagonist, annoyed, asks if he's really going to run away. The spirit says he warned him she was suspicious. Reporters say they're from Huan Moon News and ask if they can ask some questions. Was it true he cleared the 10th floor alone? They say everyone's wondering which guild he plans to join. Kim thinks he needs to get to the 11th floor fast and wonders what he should say. The reporters keep asking questions. What's his relationship with the paladin? And is he really rank E? Gong says the 20th floor will also be cleared by him, tells them to work hard and says, transfer. The reporters yell for him to wait. A voice says to all those who wish to climb the tower, They wish them all the luck in the world. They appear in an empty place. Marcus looks around confused. Voices yell not to let them advance, to stop the demon army for the kingdom of Egypt. Guards charge against monsters. Voices yell not to retreat. If they lose more territory, the empire will fall. They won't last much longer. There are too many enemies. People ask what the hell these monsters are, what's going on. They shout not to give up, they're the last line of defense, and to watch out for arrows. The protagonist arrives and wonders what's going on. He thinks the tutorial is over and situations like this will become normal on future floors. A guard calls them heroes who will save the kingdom, asking for their help on a mission to defend humanity. This port is the only place with an open trade route. Without it, the kingdom won't survive. The spirit says he's greatly improved his sense usage, like vision and hearing, through aura. The guard asks the heroes from another world to pour blessings upon Egypt. The system notifies the quest name, Defend the Port. The objective? A disaster has struck the Egypt Empire. The legendary Demon King has gathered his army to destroy the empire. They ask, wait, there's a Demon King? And where the hell is this Egypt Empire? The monsters attack and the warriors grow frustrated, saying they just keep coming. At least let them read the quest. They ask how they're supposed to complete it like this. The Holy Sword slashes at the monsters and says they don't know the details, but probably just have to kill them all. People shout to follow the Holy Sword. A warrior charges, calling the goblins bastards, saying he's killed hundreds over the last 6 years. Voices yell to stay calm and push them back after taking them down. The system notifies Kim. Welcome, you have received the 10th floor rewards. Reward for the normal stage, blessed by the goddess of war and granted access to maps of floors 11 to 20. The spirit asks what the hell is that, says he knew it'd be something crazy, and tells him to focus on training instead of relying on these busted abilities. The system notifies that the secret stage reward is a blessing from the goddess of humanity, granting access to the location of NPCs from floors 11 to 20. Secret stage reward. Blessed by the goddess of merchants, he may now obtain an item that exists between floors 11 to 20. Gong says that's the taste of true talent. Themes. Each tower section has one. Floors 1 to 10 were the tutorial, a city for beginners to get used to the tower with designated hunting zones on each floor. Floors 11 to 20 follow the Demon King and Heroes theme. The protagonist says there are only 2 ways to defeat the demon army now. Either gain enough power to wipe out an army alone, or have the leadership to command one into battle. The Sword Emperor asks if he's choosing the second option. Does he even have experience? Has he ever led anything? Kim replies of course not, but he's confident he can learn, and asks if the spirit was just complaining about his luck. The spirit says yes, he's a total cheat. Gong says he'll show him why this game is about skill, not luck. The system begins locating NPCs. The protagonist tells it to show only the NPCs on the 11th floor, and only those in the top 100 by skill level. The Sword Emperor says, wait, no need to do that, just fight them one by one and get stronger. He knows Kim is shameless, but this is overkill, and asks if he isn't ashamed of being named after Confucius. Kim says not at all, and now asks the system to show only the top 3 NPCs with leadership skills, place them on the map, and include his own location too. He asks what the spirit thinks, if this isn't a pure skill game, and says he just turned already great rewards into amazing ones, all thanks to his ability. The spirit asks if he calls that ability, because to him, that's just hacks. Gong says that's part of his skill set too. He thinks the closest blue point on the map is that NPC. He approaches the general and greets him. The general looks to the side and asks how he can help. The protagonist thinks the man's mustache is amazing and figures the skill must be just as amazing. He says he has a request. The general says as long as it's within his power, he'll do anything he can. Kim says to eliminate him. The general is shocked. Gong says he has one last secret move. When his heart stops beating, the goddess of war will bless the battlefield. Basically, it's a self-destruction. If they can activate that blessing, they'll win the battle. The general says blessing or not, he couldn't take his life. The protagonist says to consider what's at stake here. If he doesn't do it, Kim plans to end his own life right there, because he knows that's the best way to help the kingdom. That's why he's asking him to do it. The general asks if it's truly a request. Kim replies that he's the general responsible for the port's defense. Instead of dying by his own hands or the enemy's claws, he wants to give his life to the honorable general, risking everything to protect the kingdom. There's no time. Do it quickly, regardless of what's at stake. To think he has to take the life of a hero from another world. The spirit asks if he's really falling for this. The general says what a wretched world they live in, attacked by the so-called Demon King, and now this. The Sword Emperor says the only disgrace here is the general's intelligence. The general draws his sword, asks the gods for forgiveness, and promises to make it quick and painless. Gong thanks him sincerely. The general asks for his name. The protagonist gives it. The general thanks him for his sacrifice, calling him a true hero. The system notifies that Kim has lost his life and is copying a random skill from NPC Sarbast Ajim. Gong thinks of the saying, there's always someone flying above the one running. Meanwhile, warriors have been eliminating enemies for 6 years. The protagonist thinks of another saying about a hunter who swings swords beside other hunters. People notice him and ask who that hunter is, riding beside them. It's Kim. The system displays the skill Battle Knowledge, which grants the qualities of an exceptional general, giving him awareness of everything on the battlefield. Gong thinks this is a skill he created. He says if they go straight and turn right, they'll find the demon army's general. There are some monsters nearby, but it'll be fine. Just take them out. A soldier responds that he understood. They shout that the goddess's hero will protect them. The protagonist thinks it's a skill that lets him pretend to be a martial arts expert, earning the general's trust, and tells them to turn right there. He thinks this skill is super effective thanks to the minimap and the knowledge from having lived this day a few times. And yes, that goblin launched off like a rocket again today. But skills aren't everything. This is the holy sword of protection from Ifanta Ejim. Legend says a goddess gave it to the Ejim Empire's founder. Before becoming a historical legend, the founder vanished, along with the sword, leaving behind only a prophecy. When the destined day comes, the one to wield the sword shall appear. Whoever wields the holy sword will receive absolute trust and support from the people of Ejim. The guards shout that it's the founder's holy sword. The gods have not forsaken them. Praise the empire and the hero. Attack! A glow surrounds the sword. Kim says this is great. Clearing that secret stage was worth it for this view. The spirit asks how it was worth it. He exchanged it for a crappy item. It's just a shiny, hard sword. There are tons of epic items. Why choose this one? Gong says it has high durability. It's shiny and makes every NPC from floors 11 to 20 go nuts. He asks if he gets it now. NPCs aren't just quest givers. They're tools to complete quests. The guards tell each other to stay safe. Someone asks why he's the only one with the general. He even looks like a hunter. The protagonist is thrilled, says envy sounds beautiful. The Sword Emperor asks who taught him aura, and instead of using it to enhance swordsmanship, he's using it to amplify hearing and eavesdrop on gossip. Kim asks if he's mad and tells him to sue him. The east wing of the demon army has been wiped out. He tells them not to stop and keep pressing toward the main force. The guards say they can win and to follow the general. The goblins are trying to protect the Goblin Emperor, the 11th floor boss, who yells at them to stop the invaders and calls them idiots. Gong charges, jumps off his horse, activates his skill, strikes the boss, and defeats him with one blow. The guards shout they've slain the evil monsters. The goddess's hero helped them defeat the enemy leader. Long live the Ejim Empire! The goblins panic and flee. The warriors mock them, saying those little shits are running. They slash nearby goblins and say solo hunting is their specialty. Wipe them all out. The system notifies that the stage has been cleared. The 11th floor was cleared today. The warriors celebrate. They cleared it in a single day. The system analyzes raid participants, analysis complete. Max participants exceeded, announcing the top 10 contributors. The ranking is shown. Kim is first place. People look and ask why first place has no nickname. The Holy Sword came in second, and they wonder if the 10th floor clearer is some kind of hidden master. The spirit says master his ass. He's just a clever little cheat. The protagonist asks if he'll finally admit this is a skill-based game. The Sword Emperor says no. He refuses to accept it. Kim thinks the ghost really values technique over skills. He promises to practice his swordsmanship before they reach the 20th floor, so stop whining. The spirit asks if he's serious. Gong says of course. Would he miss the chance to learn from the Sword Emperor? In fact, the Sword Emperor should be begging him to learn his sword techniques. The spirit asks if that's true and says he's finally recognizing his worth. The protagonist thinks this is too easy. The Sword Emperor says the tower might be a bit different from his own. Someone approaches, calling him the goddess-blessed hero. It's the general, thanking him for helping achieve victory, saying he'll be forever grateful. Kim says it was nothing. They won thanks to everyone's hard work. The general says it looks like he worried for nothing. A long time ago there was a prophecy. One day the demon army would arrive, but there would be no need to fear as heroes from another world would also be summoned. However, he had his doubts. Would these heroes really fight with all their might for a world that wasn't even theirs? It seems those were just the pointless concerns of an old man, and he wants to thank him properly. He extends his hand and they shake. Gong thinks that even though they're from different worlds, the act of shaking hands still holds the same meaning, and wonders if it's because, no matter the world, humans always have two hands. The general says he has high expectations for him. The protagonist replies he'll do his best. The system notifies that it's analyzing the completion rewards, and the analysis is complete, rewarding the top contributors of the raid. The top contributors will receive early access to the 12th floor. Until they receive their rewards, all other players are restricted from accessing the 12th floor. The general says he's entrusting the fate of his empire to him. The spirit asks if only the top 10 will be summoned to the 12th floor, and if the old man Marcus will be there too. If so, he'll try to attack him like a madman. Kim tells him not to worry. The worst that can happen is getting eliminated. The Sword Emperor asks if he's serious. Gong says it's fine. He has a plan. The system notifies transfer complete. The protagonist is summoned to another location, and wonders if this is the Ejim Empire's palace. The Black Witch is also summoned and says she never expected to be brought to a place like this. The Almighty God says the hunter was incredible. Kim notices he looks even younger after using his own ability. The Inquisitor says he was really impressed by his performance on the 11th floor. It was a brilliant way to use the NPCs. And that sword he used was very strange. Was it a reward from the 10th floor? Gong confirms. The Almighty God says, just as he thought, using the 10th floor reward to conquer the 11th, he's amazed by how efficiently Kim uses what's at his disposal. The protagonist bashfully says it wasn't that amazing. Then the Inquisitor uses the sacred technique of the God of Flesh, blocks an attack, and says it's a surprise. Asks since when Kim became an eliminator. The Holy Sword says to step aside, he's going to eliminate that man. The Inquisitor apologizes and asks why that man. Does he mean Hunter Kim? Marcus says if he doesn't get out of the way, he'll cut off both his arms in the process. The Almighty God says that would be troublesome. He still has plenty of use for those arms. If they let the hunter be eliminated, the reputation of the 5 major guilds will be ruined. He asks if he can at least know the reason behind the pursuit. The Holy Sword replies he's under no obligation to explain. The Inquisitor asks if that means he won't back down. Then the Almighty God uses the sacred technique, God of Teleportation. Viper and the Paladin rush in to attack the Holy Sword, but Marcus blocks both and calls them worthless worms. The Celestial Martial Arts leader calls the old man a bastard and asks what the hell he eats to be this healthy at his age. The old man says real youngsters would laugh if they knew, and asks if he's already over 40. Viper says screw that, life begins at 40, and asks how he doesn't know that. The Almighty God says it's true, and he should look at his own face. The martial arts master asks if he's not supposed to be on his side. The Paladin says to focus on the fight in front of him. They're at a disadvantage. Viper bites his lip in frustration. The Inquisitor smiles and asks the Countess for just 10,000 gold. The Guildmaster says it comes with 15% compound interest and no interest if paid in full within 3 months. Asks if that sounds reasonable. The Almighty God says he misunderstood. He wasn't talking about a loan. The Countess asks if he's seriously asking for charity from a businesswoman. The Inquisitor says yes, and admits his money is dirty. If he donates it to the temple, he might get into heaven. The Guildmaster says he's a bigger scammer than she is. She hands over the 10,000 gold. The Almighty God thanks her and releases his energy, using the sacred technique, God of Donation, imbuing holy attributes, strengthening body structure, and buffing the Paladin and Viper. Buff duration, 300 seconds. And may the gold strengthen their hands. The Inquisitor uses the complete sacred technique. The protagonist is shocked the gold coins vanished. The Almighty God says that from now, for 300 seconds, the Paladin and Viper will be completely different. Even for him, it'll be hard to deal with them, the Countess, and himself together. Besides, the Countess still has plenty of gold to spend. If he prefers, they can test which comes first, her bankruptcy or his elimination. The Guildmaster asks why her money had to get dragged into this. The Black Witch approaches and says she has some advice. His enemies won't be just the 4 of them. She made sure to join the fight too. The Hunter made an official agreement with the 5 guilds yesterday. Marcus asks, agreement? And the Black Witch confirms, currently, Hunter Kim is a member of all 5 guilds with a status equivalent to a guildmaster. So pointing a sword at him is the same as pointing it at all of them. She asks if he really thinks he can face them all. Gong thinks this was his plan from the start and quietly asks if the spirit remembers what he said back on the 11th floor. The spirit asks what words. The protagonist says there are 2 ways to fight a strong enemy. One is to be strong enough to defeat an entire army alone. The other is to raise and lead an army of your own. A lone player is nothing against a hunter with a powerful alliance. Kim calls out to the Holy Sword and says they should talk. Marcus asks, talk? And Gong says yes. Honestly, he's very shocked and doesn't know why he's being attacked. This may be their first time meeting, but he's been a huge fan for a long time. He thinks Marcus doesn't believe him. The Holy Sword must still think he's an eliminator sent by the Black Dragon. He recalls when Marcus said only an exceptional eliminator could dodge his sword. The spirit says that from an outsider's perspective, Kim's more than just weird. He definitely looks like a first-class eliminator made by one of the major guilds, not a mere rookie hunter. Gong thinks, in other words, a complete conspiracy. The old man says the outside world and Babylon aren't so different. Since entering the tower, they've pressured him daily to join a guild. But he refused every offer. He asks if they know why. He wanted to prove that it's possible to reach the top in this tower alone. Bloodlines, nationality, burdens. Unlike the outside world, which is tangled with such useless things. A person who becomes the best here with just a sword. Success can come through talent and effort alone. He wanted to give that hope to others. Then he asks what they've been doing instead. Says they've all become stagnant in the mud. The Black Witch asks how he, of all people, dares say that. She says he only survived because he cared only about himself. If he'd helped more, many other hunters could have lived. Viper says he was the only one who didn't help during the raids on the 5th, 7th, and 9th floors. Their losses could have been cut in half if he'd helped. The Countess says If he had used his influence from the outside world, today's food shortage wouldn't be so dire. Not only that, the current tower society could have been stabilized much more safely. The Black Witch asks if they're stagnant, and if that's true, then he's just a child with no sense of responsibility. If he's rank 1, he needs to bear the responsibilities of rank 1. The atmosphere darkens and a voice says, "Enough!" It's Marcus, saying they're all adults yet still whining like children. Does he look like their grandpa or something? He tells them to stop talking crap. If they want to fight, then draw their swords. The spirit says, as expected from the old man, his true disciple. Kim says they're still bickering even with just 10 people around. Even the NPCs on the 11th floor came together to save their country. The Black Witch says this has nothing to do with him. It's a much more serious matter. Gong says he understands really, but as hunters, shouldn't they focus on clearing the 12th floor instead of pointing fingers and holding grudges? Shouldn't they be better than the NPCs, not worse? They're asking for help, even if they are just NPCs. They said their nation is on the brink of collapse. He asks, how could summoned heroes put the Empire second? Is that what it means to be a hero? If you solve problems no one else can, you're a hero. So let's focus on clearing the next floors like we did with the 11th. The Paladin says he's right. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.